Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another trek through the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We're on Vol19, Chapter 11. I don't know that I can call it a Happy Mushoku Monday, but we'll try. Obviously, yes, despite the fact that I got pretty emotional at the end of Chapter 10, it only gets worse from there, which was expected. I honestly felt like if they didn't address certain things, especially with Roxy and obviously with Zanoba, it would be shocking. It would be really shocking. Now, the stuff behind Zanoba, super surprising, and I really like the direction that Refugin had taken Zanoba in this segment. It really does kind of cement this interesting thought process around his changes, but additionally kind of cements how he really is and what we kind of expected he should be, based on his appearance and what he's doing. It still has a mystique there. It still has a cool twist, but it's still grounded in reality of what they presented Zanoba as. So, but yeah, obviously the stuff around, yes, Randolph, super interesting. Orsted conversation, super interesting. But I think this is going to be a pretty long Mushoku Monday. I know I say that a lot. I had last week, everybody was like, I said 3 hours. This is going on for 3 hours. And everybody's like, wait, it's only an hour and 50 minutes or something like that. And I'm like, that's the Raw. You guys don't understand. I don't know how long it's going to be afterwards. The Raw was 3 hours. It takes a lot to kind of condense it down. Sometimes they have a lot of flub ups. There's a lot of factors in play. I'm not the best at reading something off of a screen to a camera. I can read really well. I can talk to the camera really well, but doing the two at the same time, I don't know what. I still to this day have struggled with it, but it is what it is. I still do it. Why? Because I love it. I love doing this with you guys. The premiere has just been a fantastic thing. Everybody, thank you so much for the support. We had a lot of people show up last week. Thank you. I cannot thank you guys enough for your kind words, just being here with this journey for me. It has taken something that probably would have taken me a weekend to read through and turn it into something that has been just really fantastic. This is life-changing kind of stuff, dude. So, yeah, I know that's a bit much. It's a bit much. But yes, thank you guys so much for dropping by for the premiere. Hey, chat, hope you guys are doing well. Hopefully you guys are good today, because I'm going to get into some theories. And you chat, don't be bad. Otherwise, the mods will be slapping. But yes, as per usual, greatly appreciate everybody that supports the channel through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, all that stuff. It means so much to me. Last week we had Noah with some gifteds and a super. Thank you so much, Noah. Kusha, I said it wrong last week. I'm sorry. Kusha with a super. Thank you so much. Rose Moist with a super. Dave with a super. Gearless coming in once again with some crazy drops. Gearless just coming out of nowhere and just decimating the chat. And Yang with a super. Thank you guys so much for your support. It means so much to me. But yeah, without further ado, let's just jump into it. Chapter 11, Aftermath. It was great because I had a few things that came to my mind when I was doing my edits that I'm like, I should have talked about this. I'll talk about the next Mushoku Monday. Thankfully, they're getting into it, so we could talk about it now. There's like a few things, like the whole thing with Roxy and stuff like that, where there is a deeper subject there that I think it's hard to cover. It's going to be difficult to cover, but this is the stuff that Refugin gets into that I think is absolutely fantastic, and I think storytelling should do more often. Rudius suggested cremating Pax. Incinerating what was left of his remains and burying him seemed to be the best choice. It was the most universally common way to hold memorial in this world. Zanoba shook his head, stopping him before he could go through with it. And yeah, I guess obviously the reason for that being universally common is because, again, if mana affects it in some way, no bueno. Just like with Paul, it was like, ugh, that hurts so much, but it makes sense. And again, if I was in that world, I want the same thing to happen, because I would hate the idea that what I left behind would come out and hurt somebody. Zanoba reasoned that the rebellion wouldn't end if they didn't have Pax's remains. His voice was flat and unaffected, as he suggested that they leave him intact, in order for the chaos within Chiron to end. That hurts. That hurts a lot thinking about later on. I mean, Rudius technically does catch it and goes, could this have been a bad choice? Pax had been king for however short it lasted. Reese didn't think it was right to hand over his corpse to the rebels, but there was something incredibly persuasive about the way that Zanoba talked him down. In the end, Rudius made no further argument. Instead, he used his water magic to clean Pax up before they carried him back to the 5th floor. It sucks that he goes out of his way in order to clean him up, because obviously, you know, he's a little dirty, and again, yes, technically he did fell from there, and he's going to be bloody and covered scars and everything, so at least doing something for him to at least present him, but it sucks that the rebels don't care. They don't want that. By the time they arrived, they found Randolph with Benedict draped over his back, and luggage in his hand. Roxy had apparently helped him. Per Randolph's request, she dressed the girl and fashioned the sheets into straps so that he can safely carry her on his back. Once she was done, Roxy stored her clothes in a bag for Randolph to take with him. She did all this without uttering a word. It's already hinting at it right there. But yes, I should have picked up on that. I said my last, the Mushoku Monday, I said that, yeah, I think that request that Pax had of him was to go home. Yeah, I should have technically brought up that he probably had him take Benedict too. Now, that was a question mark there. Again, I had this kind of thought process that what if they find out when they go to check on Benedict, she took her own life or he ended her life or whatever just to end her suffering? Because yes, he doesn't want to leave Benedict behind. Even if he's jumping off the balcony, again, there's that question mark. Some people feel like, join me in that, like a lover suicide kind of thing. But there was a thought process there of, yes, no matter what, he's going to have to get her out of there or something, because when they come in there and take out, they're going to want to kill her. Especially, as we find out here in a minute, she may be pregnant. They're definitely not going to want her around. So that's a massive question mark there, and it's definitely a question mark for the future for that whole thing. But yes, it makes sense that he'd be like, hey, take her back home. And again, my whole point there was that, yeah, he'd want him to go back home. What of His Majesty? Randolph asked.
Dead. I will hand his remains over to the insurrectionists in order to put an end to their rebellion.
Randolph's expression remained placid, revealing nothing. He probably already knew before he asked.
His Majesty requests that I take his queen and escape, that I might deliver her safely back to the King Dragon realm.
It was more obvious now than ever that he knew Pax would do this. Much as Rudius wanted to demand to know why Randolph didn't stop him, he had no right to drill him about it.
In that case, it would probably be best that you come with us. We know a way out.
Very well, Your Highness. Your consideration is deeply appreciated. Randolph bowed his head to end their brief exchange. Now that's cool because, again, I've pretty much come to the conclusion that Randolph created those walls when they were trying to get into the place through that escape area. I kind of assumed that Randolph created that. Now, at the time, I thought he created that in order to prevent people from coming in there. Like, he knew about the escape point. But this kind of implies the idea if Zanoba's like, we'll show you the way, that he possibly doesn't know about the way. Now, he could know, and he's just going, okay, well, Zanoba, if you think that, I was going to go that way. And then they get there, and he's like, yeah, I was going to go that way anyways. But it kind of makes me believe that no matter what, if he creates this fortification, it just goes straight down. Which makes sense. Again, if you're going to create something that creates a divide, it's going to need to go down, because otherwise people could just dig right underneath the wall. So it's kind of interesting that they were at each other's throats a moment ago, fighting to the death, and now Randolph was accompanying them peacefully. Normally, Rudius would have kept his guard up, suspicious that it was a trap from the man god, but he knew better than that. It was clear that Randolph had no desire to battle them. Or he's faking. He's tricking you again, Rudius. That is technically an interesting thing. I mean, we know where this goes based on me already reading this whole segment, but it is interesting to kind of think of the idea of, again, based on there being a destiny and everything, you'd probably have to play into something like this for a long time to let somebody let their guard down. I mean, the man god did that. He helped Rudius for a long time until he let his guard down and then struck. So yes, Randolph could technically be doing all of this according to what he's being told, just for the sake that Rudius eventually goes, it's clear he didn't want to fight. Randolph Marignane, the death god, ranked 5th amongst the 7 great powers. His strength put him at the level that far exceeded Rudius's. And yet, he looked fatigued. Not that he was the only one, of course. Roxy and Rudius were bone tired too. If someone pleaded to him right now to fight Randolph again, he'd probably limply shake his head. No, please, no, I'm tired. Not a single one of them had energy left. Zanoba was no exception, staying deathly quiet. Again, there is like that mindset there of, is this all because of Randolph, putting on that facade, or is it strictly that Randolph literally has been chilling and cooking food all the time and not doing physically straining stuff? I mean, cooking, let's be honest, is physically straining. And again, if he's getting his own dragon meat, that's physically straining. But it seems to imply that he has lost his edge. They made their way through the secret tunnel and to the watermill. There, once Rudius' lamplight spirit lit up the magic armor, Randolph abruptly spoke up, dumbfounded. Is this the fighting god's armor? It's like, really? 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 Again, I think this dude's been around for a long time. Or he maybe has seen it. Maybe it is somewhere, put somewhere. That's interesting. No, this is something that Zanoba and I put together. It's a magical implement. Magic armor, as we call it. Used for intense battles. Oh, is that so? Yeah. If you use this thing, I might have been in a bad way. I'm not so sure. Ultimately, I was powerless in the face of your enthralling blade. Randolph grinned. You had me cornered before I even had a chance to use it. Sorry? Again, is he telling the truth? I love things like this where it's like, do you know? Really? Is he lying now? Was he lying there? Is he lying? Is he always lying? Is everything that he says literally backwards? Whenever he says yes, does he say no? It's super interesting. I love it. Your synchronized attack left me pretty battered, and the last of my mana was pretty much drained, getting rid of those stone cannons you launched at me. Again, if he was going to step forward and literally say that he was going to use magic on Zanoba, unless he had some sort of forethought that they would back down at that point, I don't see him saying that when he wasn't going to do that. Like, he literally put his sword up and then was seemingly going to use fire magic on Zanoba. I don't see it. I don't see it. Again, I think he has a lot more mana than that. I mean, because technically the only thing that he really used mana for is, yes, possibly his battle aura, blocking Zanoba's attack. Maybe that uses, a lot of mana in order to use the battle aura in the way that he's using it. It was as if he was trying to comfort Rudius. In other words, perhaps his real enthralling blade had been him pretending he had plenty of fight left. Rudius' own cowardice convinced him not to press the attack. But if he had, they could have won. That's how it sounded anyways. Who knew if his words were now genuine? I don't think so. I think he could be sort of telling the truth right here. But honestly, truthfully, like I said before when we were talking about that whole fight, I'm like, this isn't going to be it. Like, everything's playing out so well, but if they actually beat him in that moment, Rudius fires off a stone cannon barrage and the guy dies, it would be like, this guy, that is one of the 7 great powers? Again, yes, he's rusty. He's been doing cooking all the time, but really? It goes in that whole thing where they've established the 7 great powers are the 7th most powerful people of the world. And if the Death God falls to that attack, how the hell did he last this long? That's my question mark. Again, it doesn't stay consistent to the world itself. Come to find out a couple volumes later or something, maybe even at the end of this volume, suddenly they find out Randolph dies. He was beat by some weak dude. And then we go, yeah, okay, so he was really rusty. Or maybe he always just beat people by sheer coincidence or trickery. It could be. I don't think that's the case, though. I don't think he would have lasted this long and fought so many people just to lose to Rudius and be that weak. I think it's all a facade. He continuously creates that facade. And it could be an aspect that maybe he's humble. It could be really just an aspect that he's super humble. This guy's such a good guy. He's just like, yeah, no, you're really good. Just like genuinely saying, maybe self-deprecating. He doesn't think he's that great. Or he's just a nice guy and he wants to let Rudius know that he's really good. But it is interesting, again, going into this whole thing, I still think he could be telling the truth that he didn't use his enthralling blade. Truthful. I don't doubt that. Because again, my mindset during that chapter, during the fight, was this all sounds like what Rudius normally does. He's always doing this. He's always doubting himself. He's always freaking out. He cowards, which is not a bad thing. In the face of death, a coward lives. The person that flees lives the next day. It's fine. But that's his mindset. I don't think that there was a side of me that was going, this is probably just him. He thinks it's that. He thinks it's that. It's almost like the enthralling blade goes proxy through Orsted to Rudius. Don't attack when you're defending and all that kind of stuff. Do the reverse. Now Rudius is overthinking everything. So I think he might be telling the truth that he didn't use enthralling blade, but I don't think it's truthful that he was going to lose. I think there's this aspect that this dude's really, really strong. I mean, he literally threw Zanoba twice across the room. But who knows? Maybe he always just won every single fight through trickery. Always tricking somebody into thinking and looking behind themselves and killing them. It could possibly be. I just don't think he would have lasted this long on that mindset. Somebody would not be willing to listen to his trickery. Somebody would be so headstrong or so strong that they just don't ever look behind themselves. If they were fighting him and he said, "Oh, Death God, you came to save me," and he just goes, just brute strength, whatever. If something attacks me in the back, who cares? I'm going to kill you. Like a very single focus. But again, who knows? Maybe the Death God's tricking me. Maybe he's tricking me. It's super interesting, though. I love his stuff. Rudius' own cowardice convinced him not to press the attack. But if he had, they could have won. That's how it sounded anyways. Who knew if those words were now genuine? No. Either way, Rudius started to say to himself, all they could do was sigh. Not fighting was the best option anyways. Agreed. Win or lose, it wouldn't have mattered. And now, he only felt more exhausted from thinking about it. He's like, I just don't want to think. I don't want to think anymore. I just want to sleep. By the way, Sir Randolph, you said you knew about the man god, right? Rudius decided to ask the question while it was on his mind. It was rare for anyone to know of the man god. And after all their efforts, it'd be pathetic to walk away without anything to show for it. Yeah, not that I know much about him. Well, would you mind telling me what you do know? Sure, I guess. All I heard was that a relative borrowed his power long ago to face an extremely powerful foe. An extremely powerful foe, you say? He did it to protect his fiancée. At the man god's suggestion, he stole the fighting god's armor, wore it himself, and went into battle with the dragon god Laplace.
who, at the time, was said to be the strongest in the world. Poor Sod wasn't able to protect his brethren in the end, though, and the battle nearly took them both out. Who knows if that's even true? Reese heard a story like this before. Kishirika and Orsted had said something similar about how the dragon god and fighting god had battled. It was a story I heard a lot when I was younger, when alcohol was involved. Figured it's probably complete fiction, but I grew up hearing it all the time. So naturally, the man god's name stuck with me. This was, in fact, pretty valuable information. Randolph was recounting the story about one of the man god's previous disciples, though Rui suspected Orsted already knew about this. I think he would have to. I think he should, because again, this is something before Ruiz was involved. So I think everything like there is going to be pretty consistent with what he knows. It's just everything after this I think that Orsted should always question. So, who's the name of the relative? The Demon King of the Begoya region, Badigadi. What? Okay, we really need Badigadi to show up again. It's been a long time since we've had some bwahas. We need it now. Please, Badigadi needs to show up right now. I really do feel like almost like Rudius should make it his next priority. Hey, Orsted, I need to go find Badigadi. We need to talk. I mean, this obviously does answer some really important questions, like, yes. And we talked about that back then. I mean, Rudius even thought to himself back then. When Rijerd went to go leave his house, he runs into Badigadi, and there was like this moment of tension. And even Rudius at the time was like, yeah, Rijerd was on Laplace's side. It makes sense. They were going around destroying a lot of things. He probably got involved in the fight. You had Badigadi was probably fighting against them and lost a lot of people to Rijerd. I mean, yes, even in general, the Superds were going around killing their own kind. So it makes sense that Badigadi would be pretty upset at Rijerd, have some kind of question mark there. There could also be an aspect there that there could be... This does make me kind of wonder now. If Badigadi was literally after Laplace, or at least was going to fight him to protect his people or his bride, that does make technically sense that there could be a sense there that if Badigadi knows, and this is kind of one of the reasons why I kind of want him to talk to Badigadi, it makes me wonder if he knew that Rijerd ultimately helped taking down Laplace. Because if that's the case, yeah, it doesn't erase everything else. It doesn't erase everything else that he was fighting Laplace for, and what the Superds did, but it at least says, hey, he helped finish him off. That at least helps somewhat. Again, and it does explain, hey, he was being controlled. Doesn't make it right. Again, that's even Rijerd's perspective. Doesn't make it right. But at least I have an answer as to what happened here. I have an answer of this curse and all this other stuff, that how it worked. He has that answer, and he's helping his own kind, and he's gonna lose that curse so he can possibly move forward finally. But yeah, I really want to see Badigadi now. I need it. It like so sucks because it's like so far back there. It's like, gosh, he disappeared at some point, and he's yet to show back up. Again, I think that was the last time we seen him. When he walked away from Rijerd, I think that was the last time we seen him. And I wonder if he walked away because he thought that Rijerd was going to stay there, and he didn't want to start something. Like he's being respectful to Rudius and going, okay, I gotta get out of here because otherwise I'm going to start something. But yeah, Badigadi did it to protect his fiancée at the man god's request, stole the fighting god's armor, wore it, and went into battle with the dragon god Laplace. Orsa said that the fighting god fought Laplace when he was still one being, and he tore him in half. So the assumption there is that the fighting god lost after that, or ran away or something, I don't know. And at that point, it seems like Badigadi, according to this, would have gotten the armor from the man god, telling him about the armor, to go fight Laplace. At least one of the split versions, probably the demon god Laplace, because that's the one that everybody was after. That's the one that's causing all the destruction and everything. So he took up that armor at that point and fought him, which just technically make me believe that, yes, basically the man god told the fighting god to go fight the demon dragon god Laplace, cut him in half, and then and after that, the man god said, he's not done yet, Badigadi, go fight him now, which is very interesting. It does make you kind of wonder how big the fighting god is. If Badigadi fit in that. I don't know, maybe Badigadi made himself smaller in order to do that. Cut off parts of his body in order to make himself smaller to fit in it. But still, again, very interesting. Very, very interesting. And to protect his betrothed in the end. That's the other interesting thing. It makes you wonder, is the betrothed somebody that Laplace was going to kill, and thus the man god told him, hey, he's going to kill your betrothed? Or if the fighting god is Badigadi's betrothed. That would be interesting as well. But Very interesting. Like I said, so badly want to talk to Bodyguardi right now. We really badly need to talk to Bodyguardi right now. It's so funny because I was looking back at my notes that I made on that particular part, and it's like, gosh, it makes me more and more wonder if the technique god is actually Orsted. And again, Orsted didn't get sent over until after the war, after the changing of the era and everything like that. But it could be that that's like part of him. I don't know, maybe he just kind of slumbered or something and then came back. Who knows? That whole section is just a massive can of worms, and it sucks because it's one of those things where every time they talk about that war, every time it's brought up, something new comes up that twists it. Against that whole thing where people claim this is what actually happened, but every single time it's brought up, somebody goes, oh yeah, that's what they always say. At least once, Kishirika's like, hey, yeah, that whole thing, no, this is what actually happened. And Risa's like, wait, no, that's not really what happened. It's like, dude, she was there. She was there. No, the fighting god wouldn't be Bodyguardi's betrothed. That would be Kishirika. I don't know why I was thinking that. Unless Kishirika is the fighting god. Unless Kishirika is the fighting god. Oh my gosh, can of worms. We need to talk to Bodyguardi so bad right now. It's not even funny. Give me clarity, Bodyguardi. There's too much stuff in my head right now. Rias figured it was complete fiction then. Bodyguardi he knew was heroic, if not a bit half-hearted at times. I kind of wonder about that. Is he saying he knew was heroic? I don't remember him really saying that he was heroic, but again, he could be applying that. But yes, I do agree with the idea that he would see him as being half-hearted. He was a chill dude. He's a guy that didn't want to fight. But again, that could be all in what happened to him. Bodyguardi could be this way because of all that crap that happened then. Again, seeking to get stronger and stronger. He even talked about his nephew. Again, one of that aspect of the nephew is possibly the fighting god. Or no, it actually makes me believe. Oh wow, I didn't think about that. That the nephew is Randolph. The one that Bodyguardi was talking about was Randolph. I think he said nephew. But again, related. And that was a whole thing there. He's part Demon King, or Immortal Demon King. So it makes sense that he is related to Bodyguardi. Interesting stuff. At least that part of my prediction of him possibly being tied. I mean, I don't remember if I said Bodyguardi at the time, but I did say I was curious which one he was actually related to. God, my mind's everywhere right now. I hate this kind of stuff. Really just can imagine someone making up a story about him. Not that he thought that Orsa was lying about the story at all, but people often claimed other people's valorous deeds for their own. Thank you, Rudy said with a trailing off voice. All that said, Ruiz was totally wiped. He didn't have enough energy to say anything else, to think that he'd been on edge this whole time for nothing. He didn't want to think anymore, just wanted to go home and crash. He had not slept for an entire day, to be fair. Man, that's it? That's it? I guess he technically did fight a lot, and walk around a lot. Randolph, what do you plan to do now? I plan to return to the King Dragon Realm. After that, I'll protect Her Majesty till she gives birth. Then, I'll teach her kid academics, swordsmanship, and culinary skills too. Gives birth? So, Benedict was pregnant then. It was hard to tell by looking at her. Yeah, that makes me wonder, like, obviously, it would have to have been a previous time. I don't see Pax, like, going at it that one time and then, like, hey, no matter what, after this, when I tell you to, you're going to take Benedict and go back to the King Dragon Realm. I'm probably going to get her pregnant. I think she's probably known for a while. But it is kind of cool that he decided to stay at her side and raise the child and teach the child how to fight and everything like that. So I don't know. Maybe the legacy of Pax is no longer over. Maybe he's reincarnated. He's reincarnated as Benedict's child. That'd be okay. That's a. Anyways, that's a bad a manga or something out there, or artwork. I was told to give the kid lots of praise as they grow up, so they may end up spoiled rotten. Randolph confessed with a shrug. I see. Pax even told him to make sure to spoil that kid. God dang it, dude, this sucks. Freaking Pax. Damn it, Pax, I don't care about you. Shut up. Benedict would give birth to the child, and Randolph would raise it. Yeah, that's the interesting thing. It's literally pointing at the idea that he's going to protect her until the birth and then teach the kid. And right here, I mean, this is really just assuming that he's going to raise it. Makes you wonder if Benedict's idea here is to have... Because there's a good chance that if Benedict goes to the King Dragon Realm, there's a question mark. Is she going to be, like, going to the palace again? But either way, it does make sense that once Benedict has the child, they may want to get rid of it. They may want to get rid of the child, hide it, and get rid of it. And so he probably is going to be at her side, make sure that she has it, and protect her, and then once it's birth, he'll take the child and leave, because they may kill it. And so this is, if Pax was planning this whole thing, would want him to take the child, protect it, and get it out of there. So that's actually really cool. We just wondered if Benedict knew Pax was planning to die. Perhaps the natural thing to ask them is why they hadn't stopped him if they knew.
But he wasn't about to pose that question to either of them. They couldn't have stopped him, and it was likely they were the ones who felt the most miserable about his passing. We're already getting into it, but yeah, that's a very tough thing to deal with it. And the idea of like, you can't. If that's what they plan to do, it's very difficult to stop them. Like, what are you going to do? Yes, you can go through steps in order to help them, obviously get them to help, support them, and try to get them through it, give them therapy or something like that. Try to get somebody that can talk to them and talk them through it to find a resolve and to find purpose and hope in their life. But you can't really criticize somebody because, like, again, if they don't know what they're doing, if they don't know how to handle it, and you're claiming this, it's like, well, what are they supposed to do? If that's what he wanted to do, he's going to do it. And with Pax's situation here, yeah, it's very difficult to say that anybody would be able to stop him. This is what he chose to do. He was already resolved to do it. And it's a very difficult thing to say that you can stop him. It sucks. It's a really sucky subject.
Sir Randolph, would you permit me one last question?
Surrounded by darkness, Randolph tilted his skull-like face to wait for his query.
Why did you stick by Pax for so long? Because the king of the King Dragon Realm ordered you to do so?
Randolph wore a thin smile. Nope. I did it because I liked the guy.
Very well. Then allow me to extend my gratitude.
Gratitude. Prince Zanoba, you are an intriguing man. His faint smile remained as he turned to Rudius. Thanks for being there for my brother. Oh, by the way, Sir Rudius. Yes? What is it? From what I hear, it's best not to involve yourself with that man god. My relative said as much. Doesn't matter whether you're on his side or against him. It won't end well for either of you. Wise words. It was a bit late. He wished Randolph would have told him that 10 years ago. I kind of laughed aside of that whole comment. I mean, yes, obviously, Randolph, again, according to whoever this person is he talking to, which again, Bodygotti, supposedly, Bodygotti was either the one involved or directly or not directly. It seems to imply that it is Bodygotti. The way they're talking about it, it is Bodygotti. He was a disciple of the man god. But yeah, it's implying here that Bodygotti probably told him, yeah, don't get involved with that dude. He's going to mess up everything. He's not going to help you. Whether it's for him or against him, he's conniving. It seems like Bodygotti has figured out that the man god is conniving. He is twisting things up. He is manipulative. But yeah, this is kind of funny in the idea that he says, I wish it was 10 years ago. Now, it's not 10 years ago, but yes, technically Rudius did run into Randolph. And yeah, that kind of sucks that he couldn't have told him then. But that's the question mark. Would Rudius listen? If Rudius got... Because at that point, he'd only really met the man god a bunch of times in the Demon Continent. He never met him in the Millis Continent. And it wasn't until he got out of the Millis Continent, like right... I think it was after he met Randolph. He ran into the man god again, and that's when he told him to go to Sharon. So it kind of makes me wonder, with everything that happened on the Demon Continent, would he listen to Randolph? If for some reason, while they're in that restaurant, Rudius brings up the man god, and Randolph, his ears twitch, and he goes over there and says, hey, dude, you don't want to do that. Here, have some karage. Would Rudius listen to him? I think he would. I really do think that Rudius would be receptive of him. Because it wasn't really until the whole thing with Sharon that Rudius ever had an inkling of trusting him. He didn't trust him for nothing back here. So I think Rudius would actually be receptive of it. Especially because again, he's always seen him as a door-to-door salesman. He's a scammer. Nobody helps somebody like this. It can't be. So up to that point, Rudius would be like, yeah, I agree. Makes sense now. Everything's connecting, and he would be completely against. Now, I still think that the man god could eventually manipulate him back into it, and it would be as simple as saying, I can help you find your sister and your maid. I think he would actually accept it at that point. I think he would accept what Randolph would have said then, but then he would probably still twist to the man god. Well, I'll believe him if it can help Aisha and Lilia. Interesting. But yeah, that was shorter than 10 years ago, but it was pretty close. The timing there was pretty close. 10 years ago would be the point where he probably first met him, I think. Thanks to his relationship with this man god, my relative had a rough time of it himself. That sounds like, that line sounds really weird. My relative had a rough time of it himself. A rough time of it, but it sounds weird. It sounds weird. Right, Bodygotti. It did occur to Rudius that he once said something which implied he did know the man god. Unfortunately, Rudius had no idea where he was right now. Yeah, that's the weird thing, because again, he knew. Bodygotti seemed to have known. But I have to go back there and check. It was like one of those things where it almost sounded like it was a different name, which does make sense. He could be named something else, or he could call himself something different to Bodygotti back then. Maybe he changed his name at some point. Well, everyone, be safe, Randolph said, bidding him farewell.
You as well.
He exchanged a handshake with Zanoba before turning and leaving. His skull-like face
fade into the darkness. Left on their own, no one spoke a word. They then dragged themselves into the watermill and passed out. That's it? No, I want more. Give me more. You can ask so many questions. You don't ask a single one. Dang it, Rudius. This kind of stuff annoys me. Just a little taste. Just a little taste. Refusing to give it a little taste. They awoke by noon the next day and made their way back to the capital. The rebel army already moved into the palace, and groups outside the walls vanished. The chains once holding the gates shut was gone. The Eye of Severance, that was what Randolph called the demon eye he possessed. But Rudius had no idea how it kept the king's enemies from infiltrating the palace. In any case, the effects had worn off at some point, either because Randolph strayed too far, or because enough time had passed. Very interesting. Now, here's that interesting thing, because again, I keep saying the Eye of Severance is what caused that wall underneath the ground, but it's like, I don't know why Rudius would be so easily able to manipulate that earth and get through there when people weren't able to get through the wall outside. It makes me think that whatever caused that severance outside was much more stronger. So maybe it's weaker down below, or maybe because Rudius is more powerful to get through it. But yeah, it kind of makes me wonder if it wasn't the case. Pillars of smoke rose from inside the castle, likely from cooking fires. You could almost feel the elation from afar. Those inside were bound to be drunk on victory, much like the soldiers of Fort Caron after the battle. There was even celebrations at all corners of the city. It was as if the people were cheering for the fall of the foolish king and the bright future that awaited them. There was no sign of mourning or despair anywhere. Pax's remains were on display in the city's main plaza. The rebels declined to show him any decency, stripping him of all of his clothes. For some reason, there was an ugly cut on his shoulder, and he was covered in dirt. That too was done by the rebels, presumably wanting to present his death as though they had orchestrated it. Yep. History is wrote by the victors. General Jade had made his proclamation, stating that Pax was an irrational tyrant, and that his nephew was the true king. It was typical propaganda. Without education in politics, Rudius couldn't say if Pax was really a tyrant. That label would probably fit him years ago, but the man Rudius had met in recent days seemed neither irrational nor a tyrant. Sure, if you focus on the part where he massacred the entire royal family, you could argue that he was a despot. Even with these disgraceful rumors circulating, only a tiny group could be seen slinging rocks at the former king's corpse. People hadn't loved him, but neither had they hated him. He had spent too long abroad and ruled for too short. If anything, most people probably had no clue who he was. In other words, most were indifferent to his death. That's the weird thing there, because yeah, that did kind of make me wonder, like, how much he was involved and how much of what he did affected people. Again, what Pax said, and in applying to the people, Pax stated that, well, we knew before that, yes, he took down the royal family. So you have the people here and there in the streets. Pax comes strolling in. He walks right past them. They probably have no clue who he is. He's got some shady-looking individuals with him, whatever. But they get past, and he probably goes in there and says, hey, I need an audience with the king. They get him inside the palace. At that point, Pax has him kill the entire royal family. And then at that point, yes, he even got rid of a bunch of people that were in power. Now, later on, when Pax was talking earlier, when he was talking about how nobody likes him and he did so many things, he mentioned that he got rid of his father's corrupt officials, which implies that he was getting rid of people that weren't helping the kingdom. If you take him by his word and you want to give him the benefit of the doubt and the positive spin to the whole thing, he got rid of the corrupt people that possibly were not helping the kingdom. So again, we're still down here on the streets. People are buying and selling stuff. Pax goes in there, kills everybody they probably don't know. And yeah, maybe at some point a statement was made. Here is your new king. And everybody's like, what the hell? What happened to the king? Pax killed them all. Okay, that's not good. Something happened. People are probably a little uneasy. Who's this new person? What is he going to do? But again, if he got rid of the bad officials and got, fixed some things, but then immediately a war happens. And yes, you can see a lot of people either supporting him, being fearful of him, or possibly even being a little fearful of the idea that the kingdom itself is weakened and that the war is going to take them over. So you have people that are panicking. I mean, they imply the idea that people were a little bit uneasy. You have mercenaries showing up and everything. There's going to be some unease about that. But then overall, like I said, what did he do that would affect the common people? Probably not much. Possibly like getting rid of the corrupt officials. They could have lowered taxes. They could have had some supplies coming in from the King Dragon realm. There could have been some positivity happening there, but what was the negativity? Yes, technically going to a war is probably the biggest one, and maybe a lot of the soldiers not liking the current situation. But I think what they're really saying here, and he's picking up on it, most people didn't care. It didn't affect them. Nothing directly from Pax was really affecting their lives. It was all political. It was all war. It was all the country itself as a whole. And many people were probably just going about their regular days, not really seeing much change.
So most people, yeah, they're like, who's this guy strung up? They never seen him. What am I supposed to care for? Oh, the nephew's the true one. We're gonna put him up there. Okay, sure, yay, whatever. Don't kill me. It's like, what are they gonna care? It's very interesting stuff there. So it does kind of suck the idea that they're kind of stringing him up and making this big grand thing of propaganda. We saved you all. Don't worry. The nephew's gonna take care of you. We are the good guys. Again, okay. As long as it's good for me. Yeah, not like I have a choice. It's very interesting stuff. But yes, him being strung up this is where it kind of gets the oof. Did he make the right choice? I think he did. I think they probably should have, like, maybe got rid of most of them or something like that. That way they can't really put him up for display. But yeah, even with these disgraceful rumors circulating, only a tiny group of people were slinging rocks at him. Ugh. Zanoba trembled as he watched. His eyes stayed wide open, fists shaking at his side. Even Rudius could feel bile rise in his throat. Perhaps it would have been best for them to have cremated after all. Maybe handing his body over to the rebels wasn't the best idea. They probably knew they secured victory the moment they took the palace. This is interesting. Again, I agree with Zanoba's mindset. I need to make sure to deliver him so that this can stop. He still cares for this kingdom and he wants it to stop. It's just going to continue. But yeah, Rudius makes a good point. Once they take the palace, who cares? Yeah, there's going to be like a where's his body? Where is Pax at? We have to find him. There might be a search for him. But once they take the palace, who cares? He's probably in hiding, whatever. But again, nobody, the people of the kingdom don't know. Jay could literally say, we killed him, and everybody would believe it. So what was the point in giving the body over? Yeah, there's a side of me that I think Zanoba made the wrong call. But at the same time, I understand why he made the call. He wanted to stop, and he felt that was the best way to do it. He wanted to stop as fast as possible, that we can stop this. Yeah, possibly prevent them from going around looking for people that look like Pax and harming them. Either way, it's like, yeah, not good to have to see this. Your own brother being strung up like that. I mean, that's just like when Rudius dealt with that with Sylphie, or at least future Rudius dealt with that with Sylphie. Not just the fact that they're up there and they're dead and they're harmed, but also the idea that people were seeing them as criminals and throwing rocks at them, their bodies. Yeah, making a spectacle of it with them harming it and dirtying it. In fact, before all that, Rudius could have saved Pax from his fate. He could not have anticipated that he would leap from that balcony, but he could have sailed over the edge with him and deployed magic midair. No, it wasn't good to entertain such thoughts. The what ifs. The what ifs. The what if sucks. Never in his wildest dreams would he think he'd jump. By the time he did, it was already too late. If anything, he should have realized he was contemplating his death sooner. Even that seemed like it was asking too much of himself. Again, I kind of mentioned this with that whole segment. It was like, yeah, I can kind of see, because Rudius has been in that moment, Rudius has considered that. Rudius in his previous life considered that. I think he considered it in his life too. He's considered it a lot. But there is something to kind of correct my mindset in that, and I don't know if I mentioned that previously, is the idea that there's a little difference here. There's a difference in circumstances. I think what drives people to that point, thankfully myself haven't been that far into it, what drives people to that point is different, and I think that the signs of it can be different because of that. Some people laugh it off. Some people keep a smile on. Some people, it's very obvious. It's different depending on who it is. Pax was angry. Rudius here recently was sorrowful. It visually, I think, the visual cues are different depending on what's actually going on with the person. Plus, again, he was thinking about a million things at the moment. And yes, especially the guy that was right behind him. Did I make the wrong call again? Rudius had no idea what he was feeling. It was impossible to know how much he really thought of Pax as his brother. All Rudius knew from studying his face right now was that he held some kind of special feelings for the man. Perhaps something in their past. Something that Rudius didn't know about. Something that spurred such emotions in him. I don't know. But seeing this should discourage people from trying to oppose the next king. And I guess the country will be more stable now. I guess, yeah. I guess that it's a good call, Rudius. It's something to console him, and it's technically true. Rudius couldn't remember the name of the supposed 13th prince, but he recalled that he was only 3 years old. There was no way that he would have incited this all. General Jade must have been the instigator. Rudius could understand why he did it, but that didn't mean he liked it. He wondered if General Jade had actually been the man god's disciple. Was he supposed to kill him then? But if his whole aim was to kill Pax, those crows had already left the barn. Everything was already over. It was possible the man god had already withdrawn from here. It was best to leave things be. Doing anything now would be unlikely to help the cause of achieving their goal. In fact,
Ruiz had lost all confidence in his decision-making skills. Best thing to do now was to return home and await further orders from Orsted. He'd have to inform him of Pax's demise, but Ruiz couldn't leave without Zanoba. I agree with that. Just go. It's already done and over with. I mean, the only other thing I can see here is possibly having Zanoba take the throne. I know that Zanoba wouldn't want that, but it was something I kind of brought up or thought about later on, was the idea of Zanoba stepping forward, taking the throne from this new prince. He could, and yes, making it republic. And after making a republic, hand it off. Just go in there and say, hey, look, you can't have this little kid run the place. Here is Zanoba, one of the princes. He can take over. He even fought to protect the town. Everybody's going to love him because he defended them against the invading army. He could take the throne and then say, okay, afterwards, after a little while, let the kid grow up, and then we'll hand it off to him. I promise I'll hand it off to him. And at that point, make it a republic before you hand it off. Which I don't know if they would be okay with that, but Zanoba, I'm thinking about going back to Shariah as soon as tomorrow. What about you? Do you plan to stick around a bit longer?
I intend to go back with you, but before we do, can we wait for Ginger? I suspect she's already heading this way.
Oh, right. Okay, then. I figured he'd be like, okay, we'll go without you kind of thing, if you're already planning on leaving. He completely forgot about Ginger. They could leave once she rejoined them. They went to the inn and stayed there for 3 days. They decided against heading towards Fort Karan to meet Ginger on the road. Ruiz was eager to get back home, but he also wanted to take in a bit more of this country before they departed. He didn't think they'd come across any groundbreaking revelations in the few days they were there, but he wanted to make sure to gather info nonetheless. You gotta bring something back to the boss. You gotta bring back something to the boss. The hot topic of the town was a recent incident. People spoke about how the rebel army surrounded the city, clashing with Pax's royal forces. They described how the death god Randolph had engaged General Jade in a death match, which lasted days. Right. I don't know, maybe this General Jade's really strong. There was also talk about how wise and noble the new king was. 3-year-old. Yeah. I don't know, maybe he's a blessed child. It could be a blessed child. Most of the stories seem fabricated, but history was written by the victors. Not all these rumors were invented by General Jade. Some might be jokes, spread as fact, and many started before the palace was taken. People love theatrics after all, and truth was stranger than fiction. From his experience, reality was strange, but also mercilessly and depressingly unforgiving. Among the rumors, the next king would sell half of the kingdom's territory to the northern neighbor. Yeah, I guess that's one way to get out of future fights. It's what they want. Ruiz wondered whatever happened to the ceasefire negotiations. Did the guys at the fort continue what they had started? Or did all their efforts amount to nothing? Zanoba didn't seem to care. He spent most of the day in the inn, lost in thought, sitting in his chair, spacing out. It occurred to Rudius that he had lost all of his family now. Well, no, apparently you have a younger brother, half-brother. He called this country home, but his place here was gone. Maybe he no longer felt like it was a place worth protecting. He wasn't particularly depressed or brooding, though. He simply spent most of his time in quiet contemplation, perhaps thinking about what he'd do from here. Yeah, we get a lot of that insight here soon. The person who got depressed was someone else entirely. Roxy. She had hardly spoken for the last few days. She barely touched her food. When night came around, she spent her time staring at the fireplace with a despondent look. Pax's death, it seemed, had come at a great shock to her. Ruiz could see why. At the very end, Pax only had words of reproach for her. It was as if he blamed her for his suicide. If Rudius was in her shoes, he'd probably be at a loss too. I'm back, Ruiz called. After a long pause, Roxy responded. Welcome back. She hugged her knees as she stared vacantly at the fire, as she had done for several days now. He took a seat right beside her, as usual. Everything he could think of saying to her seemed so cliché and insensitive. He couldn't bring himself to force the words out, even if they could assuage whatever guilt she felt. It's true. I did sigh at him back then. I mean, the day that Prince Pax mastered the intermediate spell. He was so elated when he came to show me, and I just sighed at him. I may have even muttered to myself, it sure took you long enough. That would be hurtful, Ruiz acknowledged. Roxy clutched tightly at the hem of her robe. Honestly, I think when I was teaching him, I kept comparing his progress to yours. I found myself thinking things like, Rudy could have grasped this instantly, or Rudy would have learned this at the snap of my fingers. And because of that, I saw him as being beneath you. Maybe I really did look down on him. This stuff sucks. Again, I by all indications before this moment, Roxy seemed to imply the idea that she was the failure. Like she couldn't pull this off. And again, a lot of that has to do with the fact that when she was with Rudius, he was incredible. He was a genius. He made her feel less. Like she's not great. That's why she sought out to try to make herself stronger, to essentially show that she could be the teacher that he keeps looking at her as. He looks at me like I'm something great. I need to do something else. That's like she didn't want to teach him the king tier magic. Then you'll know everything I know, and I won't be good anymore. And I think when she went to PAX, it was like this idea that now suddenly she's failing him, and she feels inadequate, and that she has to go out and learn better. Right here, I think she's actually accepting what he's saying. There's almost a side of me when I'm reading this right here. When I got to this point, in my mind, I'm thinking, is she going, okay, whatever he said has to be true. I did that probably. Like even right there, she said, I found myself thinking Rudy could have done this instantly or whatever. And because of that, I saw him being beneath you. Maybe I really did look down upon him. I may have even muttered to myself, it sure took you long enough. Who said that? Pax. There is like a side of it that I almost wonder in cases like this. I mean, I have similar experiences, definitely not to this level. I hurt for anybody has experienced somebody taking their own lives. I thankfully have never experienced it myself. By like proxy, yeah, I've experienced it, but not like directly to me, people that I know directly. But I can see if a situation like this is applied to it where you feel at fault, that you could possibly see that whatever they said that was cause of it to be true. And so she's technically taking that and applying it to her own mindset here. That, yeah, he's right. Yeah, I did that. Yeah, it's my fault. If you start blaming yourself for it, I can see you kind of accepting things that aren't technically true. Yes, a part of it could be because you're going, yeah, if that's how they felt, then obviously that's what happened. What am I to say that? Because it literally happened. No matter, there's a side of it that's like, no matter if it's true or not, it's what happened. It's what they seen, so it might as well be true. Again, that's where my mind went. Ruiz had learned intermediate magic almost instantly. Roxy herself had picked it up quickly, he assumed. Not everyone found it so intuitive, though. He found that out the hard way, teaching Edis and Ghislaine. Pax had probably done the best that he could. He put in effort, contrived his own methods for using magic, practiced them, and finally reached the next level. I'm assuming Roxy mentioned this at some point. I don't remember this part. Unless she said it in the letters. It's been a long time since the letters. He was probably hoping Roxy would shower him with praise for his accomplishment. But to his disappointment, she sighed. If Roxy had done the same to Rudius when he was in Buena Village, then he probably wouldn't respect her the way that he did now. He might not have married her either. That would, I don't know. Thinking back to that point, yeah, obviously if there was that kind of mindset there as well, there may have been a point where Roxy didn't, I guess, coddle him as much as that she did. Like, if she found him to be a nuisance and sighed at his accomplishments, I don't think that she'd be as willing to drag him out there and be positive and give him the comfort he needs to get out of that town, or out of that house, out of the yard, and get out there and do the final test and everything like that. Because that was a huge point for him. So I think if that whole situation didn't happen, then yes, he probably would have never left the town. It would have been, the displacement incident would technically still happen, and then he would probably just curl up in a ball somewhere and die. I think he's seen a lot of growth after that point, and I think if he got displaced from his home without ever leaving it, it would wreck him. He'd be ruined. Oh my gosh, the what if there is just that's a can of worms too. I would love to kind of theorize on that one. At the time, I was more focused on the power and spells I hadn't mastered. Even after I reached King Tier, I had my sights set on something even greater. Perhaps I was arrogant and ignored those who weren't at my level. Roxy chewed her lip, squeezing her knees tightly. Reese stroked her back, and she trembled slightly under his touch. I thought I had learned from my past mistakes. I knew that I had messed up, and swore to do better. Her eyes began welling up with tears. But it seems like I didn't learn a thing. It occurred to me, if only faintly, that maybe I had failed as an instructor. But I tried to defend myself by insisting that, no, it was the environment at the palace that was the problem. Tears began to trickle down her cheeks. I never realized it was my attitude that warped him. It never occurred to me, not once. Not until he said so that day. She pressed her face against her knees and tried to shut off her tears. I've always thought I could just do better with the next student, but Pax only had one chance to learn for the first time, and I blew it. Ruiz comforted her as she continued to weep. Silence fell between them. The only sound in the room was her sobbing. She was still trembling under his touch, and he didn't let it stop him. After a while, her tears subsided. When she lifted her head, her eyes were red and bloodshot. I guess it's a good point to stop right here. Again, like I mentioned before, this was the hurt, and it was something that I knew was coming from the previous chapter. Again, when Pax turned to her and said, "You sighed," and that was literally him saying, "You failed me. I am the way I am because of you. Everything sucks because of you."
And I think that's all Roxy's going to hear. We got some other ideas here. They're out there. They're turned on me. There's so much stuff in this. From the very beginning, what he said, everybody laughed at me. They thought I was foolish. They thought I was useless. Then Roxy showed up, and Roxy finally gave him attention and showed him something. So it at least showed that Roxy did praise him and accept him somehow. And he loved it. That's why he kept pushing and pushing and wanted attention. Now, the problem there comes is obviously that he was literally assaulting her. He was constantly assaulting her. Let's not forget that part. And that's the sucky thing, is it doesn't make this right or doesn't make this wrong. It's just, let's acknowledge that. He assaulted her, and she got fed up, and she left. And yes, seems like from Pax's perspective, that's why he was being so clingy and so forward, is because she didn't give him that reciprocation like he always wanted. And he got worse and worse and worse. And now it could have been that happened after he was assaulting her. It could have happened before it. No matter what, he was assaulting her. She got sick, left. But it didn't stop there. Because then eventually, yes, he does all these stupid things like kidnap people and kidnap all the guards and everything. And yes, he was searching for Roxy. But that's all his fault. That is his fault. He did all that. And it blew up in his face. He gets sent off. Goes to the King Dragon Realm. Everybody there is making fun of me. Making fun of him and insulting Benedict and all this kind of stuff. And eventually he gets strong. He gets built up. He gets knowledge. And then eventually he gets his chance to go back to Ch11. And then there, he kills everybody in there. Does more horrible things. Yes, he's trying to build a new Ch11, whatever. Trying to be a better person. Build the kingdom up. Eventually become a republic. Whatever. But then eventually, everybody's like, what the hell? What are you doing here? They come up and they rise up. The rebel army comes in and they attack him. And now he's surrounded and he has nobody rushing in there to save him. And that's what drives him to the edge. That's a lot. In culmination to this one moment. This one moment with Roxy. So no, I don't blame Roxy at all. None of this has to do with Roxy. In his mind, it may have pushed him. But I think the moment that he met Benedict, I think that's gone. I truly think, because if the big thing with Roxy is that she praised him once or something like that, and that he wanted more attention, and that may have corrupted him a little bit there, I think that all changed the moment that he found Benedict. Because honestly, I think the whole thing with Benedict was a reset. I think personally, trying to follow his mindset, I think Benedict would have been a reset. And because then at that point, he gets power. But it's because he screwed up the power, because something didn't go right there, that it eventually led to him going to the edge. I think it's only the fact that Roxy showed up that he even brought it up. I think if Roxy wasn't in that room, he would have just said everything he said to Zanoba, and eventually said, hey, Randolph, do what I told you to do, and jump. He probably would have never brought up Roxy at all. But it's just because that moment, she was there, and he finally got to say the thing that he wanted to say. I think that's really what it is. I said everything I need to say to Zanoba. Nobody likes me. Nobody cares for what I do. Nobody respects me. Blah, blah, blah. And he would jump. But Roxy was there, so he had to say what he's been wanting to say for a long time, way back there when she left. But that all doesn't matter, because what Roxy hears is just that. I pushed him. And especially, and this is the heartbreaking part, because he said it right before he did it. He said all that to Roxy, told Randolph, do what I told you to do, jump. That's the sad reality. It's the last, besides what he said to Randolph, the last thing he said, that was his parting words, was that. So I can easily see her, Roxy, again, focusing on that one thing. And that's what sucks. Because I cannot even comprehend, and I never wish that I ever do, and I would never wish it upon a single human being, even my worst enemy, even a comment troll, even somebody saying nasty things about me, even the guys that complain how I say Petagoose and Edis, even those people, I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. It's a joke. I could never comprehend the idea that something you do could be seen by you or someone else, or even be told to you is the fault for someone taking their own life. I can't imagine it. What Roxy is going through right now after hearing that before Pax jumps off that side, I can't even imagine. She was there for a long time. She knew Pax. He was a kid. To her, it literally, again, is pretty much like Rudius. He's a child that she was supposed to teach. And again, this is somebody who wants to be a teacher. This is what she's always dreamed of being, as a teacher. And she failed her one student. And not only failed them and give them the sort of acceptance and positive reinforcements they want for their achievements. Yes, I agree with Rudius here. Again, I think he's drawing a conclusion here. He could have been told this. But the idea that Pax went through so much in order to do that. He pushed himself to the limits and found some way of mastering something that we found easy. And she didn't see the accomplishment in it. Again, I think she's drawing a conclusion there. I don't think that she was as negative to him as that it's making it out. But again, that's all in the idea that at the same time, seemingly before, after, during, he was assaulting her. Either way, that's what Roxy sees. And that's all that matters. And I mean, just the idea of somebody taking their life is heartbreaking. Again, it's a difficult subject to get into. But again, to feel that you're at fault. I do know somebody who was involved with a situation where they accidentally caused the death of somebody. And to this day, it's still something that they remember. To this day, this is something that you just have to be very careful. It is like eggshells talking about anything involving what happened there. Like if there was 3 things, objects that were involved in the situation where they took their life accidentally, you be very careful to talk about any of them. If, say, for example, it was because they opened a door and it hit somebody in the forehead just right and they died. You don't bring up opening a door. You just don't talk about doors. You don't talk about door handles. You just don't say the word door because it's that much. It's a trigger. It's so easily trigger because it reminds them of a failure they did at one point. And it's technically the same. It's just one involves a person taking their own lives and one involves an accident that eventually led to the person's death. Roxy didn't say these things to Pax with the intention that he should die. I think at the time when he was assaulting her, I'm pretty sure she'd be fine with it because she set him on fire or whatever. But still, she never did that for that purpose. So in the end, it's massive, massive regrets. If I could turn back time, I would have told him, great job. If I could change something, I would have done it differently. I'm a failure, aren't I? Should I even be a teacher? Like she says, Rudy, do you think it's okay for me to continue being a teacher after this? Because yes, the massive question mark is, if I did that to Pax, would I do it again? Am I always going to be a failure to somebody? Did I cause this? Whew, okay. It sucks. And yes, I cried a lot reading this. I'm keeping myself together this time. Reese wasn't sure how to respond to that. He wasn't a teacher. The only thing that he thought of was the one word he used to address her so long ago. So long ago? No, you still do that. Teacher. His next words were superficial, plucked from the pages of a manga or a video game. He couldn't remember. Maybe it was self-aggrandizing for him to say. Maybe it was empty consolation. And maybe he was only trying to obfuscate the problem. My teacher, you haven't failed. You've only gained more experience. It's cheesy, but it's fine. But didn't he say something similar to that when they first met? When she was... Maybe it was the anime. I think when she broke the tree and she was going to get in trouble for it, he, said that she was going to get smarter or something like that. I don't remember. I remember he was playing off some visual novel thing or something like that. Others might have judged differently, but he didn't think it was wrong to say it. As long as you don't repeat the same mistake, then your other students will grow into amazing adults and find happiness on their own, just as I did. They stared at each other. Roxy's blue hair, lashes, tiny trembling lips were all things that he couldn't have at one point in his life. But now things were different. What a nasty thing to bring up. I don't know why, suddenly out of nowhere, that kind of brought up yeah, Pax, you couldn't have this, but I got it. That is nasty. I know, it was a stupid thought. I'm sorry, I'm trying to lighten things up. But now things were different. Rudy, are you happy? Yes, I've been through some awful things, but thanks to your teaching, I've found happiness. Rudy, you always say that. I can't explain it very well, but the only reason that I was able to take my first real step in this life is because you pulled me onto that horse with you. You're being overdramatic. I'm sure that's because it was so long ago, and you've convinced yourself that it's a bigger deal than it really was. True. Maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but one thing is for certain. Every time I failed, I remembered how you kept moving forward, even when you didn't succeed. That gave me strength. Good words. Okay, he started with a very cliche thing, pulled from a manga, but those are good words. And again, this always comes back to this. And I do like that it's for once finally Rudy is sort of putting a lot of that into words. Because I think even back when she essentially pulled him out of his darkness after Paul, I think even back then he didn't really kind of put these things into words. But right here, it's finally him telling her, that was a big step for me. It's a small step for many people, but that's always been the case. Whenever we talk about this, it's always been the case that when we talk about that original first point, or when he first got on that horse with Roxy, was the biggest step he has made, his first massive step in this new life. As little as it seems. Oh, he's just afraid of the horse. Get him on the horse. It's okay. Ha ha ha. Going on. Oh, he's just a little shy. He's afraid, he's shy of going out into the town or whatever. It's fine. But they don't know that he's been locked up in this cube for so long. And he was stuck in there. He got kicked out of that cube for a little bit, got hit by a truck, got put back in another cube. And he stays in there. He wasn't out of that cube before because he wanted to. And he was really forced. They pushed him out. Then he got put back in the cube. I'm safe again. Back here, I'm back and safe again. And then Roxy takes him out. It's this massive step. Comforted him. Gave him that courage he needed. And that was the big step in his life. But she doesn't realize how big that is. She says, oh, you just made yourself think that. Because she doesn't know just how much that means. Now, yes, she does technically have the knowledge that he seemingly had a previous life. He admitted that to her. And he said it in a way that was supposed to be, well, this person, whatever. And she said, you. She acknowledged what he was talking about himself. So she has a knowledge of him. It's just like the three wives so far. Roxy knows, Edis knows, and it seems to imply that Sylphie is catching on. That she seems to be taking a hint here with the whole thing with Nanahoshi and him. Roxy at this point knows about this and is now getting an idea about this, but she hasn't connected it yet. That maybe possibly that previous life has something to do with how big that is. Not so much just the ramblings of a child. But yes, I do like that aspect, that he always sees Roxy as being this person that is pushing forward. That she that's faced so many things, but she is so strong, so determined. And it's kind of one of those things of like expecting way too much out of her. And I think most cases, again, he aggrandizes Roxy for who she is. She's this incredible person. And she's always like, I'm not that incredible. Stop saying that. Or hearing the rumors that people are saying that, these people are saying that he's going around and he's telling these tales to everybody and everybody's talking about how amazing she is. When she came back to the Demon Continent, she keeps hearing these stories and she's like, why are they talking like this? It had to have been Rudy. It is kind of one of those things where he goes around and he spreads how amazing she is. And she's like, you're talking me up. I'm not that great. It's because she's great to him. And seeing how great she is what pushed him forward. And that's actually technically a good thing. I think it does set too much expectations to put on her shoulders, which I think is kind of a negative, but it's still a good thing. True, maybe having Roxy as a teacher led one of her students to choose the wrong path in life. Reese could have told her that she wasn't the only factor that led to his demise, but she already felt personally responsible. Again, to my point earlier. And as far as she was concerned, she may have well pushed him over the edge herself. However, Rudius could argue that there was other students who were still alive because of her. True. He was certainly one such exception. She wasn't the only one who kept him going, sure, but she had definitely been an important influence. So, this part hurt. It's so weird that I can read this stuff, and this part makes me sad, and this part makes me emotional. And then when I go to do it for the Mushoku Monday, this part makes me emotional. Now, there is a part of it because sometimes when I'm reading it, I'll get different thought processes going in my own head as I'm reading it. But the impact of it right here is just kicking me in the face. Sure, Pax did that because of you. But where would have I been if it weren't for you? There's so many parts throughout this entire series where Rudius himself is thinking of death. And what comes up almost every single time? Roxy. Roxy has kept him from jumping off that balcony so many damn times. That has to mean something. That has to mean something about you personally. And it's like one of those moments where I almost wish that Rudius thought of that. Hey, Roxy, you know how many times I've been on that edge? And yes, he took out your Pantsu, but hey, I got off the out. I stepped away from it.
because I thought about you. I thought about how much effort you put into me and how much you believed in me, and I had to keep moving forward. It's just like that whole first segment where he goes to the north, volume 7, right off the bat. He sees everybody fighting. They fight off the bears. He goes back home. He says, what an idiot I am. I was going to do that, and it would have been like a complete thrown in her face what she did for me. I have a reason to live. I have a purpose. That realization, it's one of those sad realities of the whole situation. With this subject itself is the sad reality of, I think a lot of people, I'm not going to be able to say it. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize soon enough. But I think some people, thankfully, don't do it because they realize something important. They realize the reason for going. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, there's some, I would assume some people, we can never know. I could assume there's some people that do think of it before they enact it, that there's something important there. They have a realization. But I think there's a lot of people that thankfully don't do it because they thought of that one thing. Again, Rudius, technically, with that whole situation in Volume 7, forgot it up into one point and then remembered. And thankfully, that kind of corrected his path a little bit there. And then later on with Sarah, completely forgets it again and nearly does it, but thankfully, Soldat Bro's there. I have no intention of telling you just to forget what happened. If anything, I think it's better if you don't. But at the same time, I don't want you to overlook the fact that there are other students whose lives you've saved, like mine. He knew he sounded pompous saying that, but it was genuinely how he felt. He didn't want Roxy to dismiss her career as a teacher. Roxy's jaw dropped as she stared at him. She seemed to be having some kind of epiphany. Her body trembled, and thanks to all that sobbing she'd done, snot was now trailing down her upper lip. In a panic, she buried her face back into her folds of her robe. Rudy, yes? I'm certain Lada must have been trying to set things up so I would meet Pax once again. It's interesting. Who was Rudy to say either way? Only Lada knew for sure. Roxy might be convinced that that was the case, but Rudius wasn't so sure. Yet, despite reservations, he still assured her. Yeah, I'm sure that must be it. Yeah, that's, again, my theory there was two theories. One was that, yes, she can see the future. But there was also my other theory was that she can read some signals that Roxy's sending. Or she can understand what everybody's saying. That's a possibility there. That she is an isekai, or she's very super smart. She's already picked up the language and she understands what everybody's saying. She just can't say anything. Or additionally, because she's Magurdian, part Magurdian, and Roxy could never read or communicate to Magurdians, but she's still sending signals, and that possibly she can pick that up. There's a couple things there, but yeah. I don't know that it would be specifically Pax. That's the question mark. I was kind of theorizing the idea that was strictly so that she would protect Rudius. What happened in this whole scenario? If Roxy wasn't there, what essentially, there's a lot of things here. There's even the question mark that he would even last Fort Kron. He could have possibly been eventually to one point pushed to the point where then he would actually attack. But because Roxy was there, he was able to fight back and they were successful. So she could have seen the future where he gets to Fort Kron and he just dies. Or he pulls that off, goes back to Sharon with Zanoba, and then arriving to Pax, they run into Randolph, they fight Randolph, and then Randolph strikes Rudius. Roxy, the goddess Roxy, the goddess Roxy saved his life. Roxy saved Rudius' life. I would argue at this point, with this one scenario, twice he would have died if she wasn't there at his side. And Lada could have seen that. I don't think it's specifically Pax. Lada doesn't know who Pax is. Why would Lada send her to go see Pax when she has no clue who Pax is? Now, she, again, if she is understanding the conversation here, she could have picked up what they were talking about with the fact of her feeling like she is at fault here. But why would she flip out that much to try to remedy that feeling that Roxy had? Now, again, if she's reading her mind, she could hear everything that Roxy's thinking about and blaming herself, but it wasn't even to this level yet. It was simply, I think I caused this. He's being crazy. He's doing some nasty stuff. I might have caused this. It wasn't he jumped off a balcony. That's much heavier. But even then, why would Lada want her to see Prince Pax if it was just to see this? Why would her daughter want her to go see Pax one more time so that she can see him jump off a balcony? No, she'd be yelling to not have mom go. Yeah, so I'm thinking it's just strictly to protect Rudius. But this is what Roxy's mindset's going to, because all she can think about right now is she caused this. She caused Pax's death. Roxy continued weeping for a while after that. He stayed at her side the entire time. The next day, she was in better spirits than she had been in a while. 5 more days passed, and General Jade made arrangements for the coronation. He planned to make a grand affair out of it, though Rudius doubted if the country's coffers could fund it. After all the financial strain between the coup and the war, Rudius understood the importance of putting on a show to make the leadership change clear. But yeah, the other thing that I really want to make clear is, as much as I hate the fact that Pax ended his own life, and again, I don't wish that upon anybody. It hurts just thinking about it. Every time I hear about it, it hurts, and it sucks. And anybody around the person, especially, my heart goes out to every one of them. It breaks my heart even thinking about that. But in the end, like I kind of laid out earlier, I don't think Roxy's at fault. I really don't. In no way, shape, or form, I don't believe Roxy's at fault. Again, I think that she's going to believe that no matter what. And again, it's because she was there. It was the last thing he wanted to say, and I think it's because he just wanted to say that for so long. But again, I think because there was a reset there, and because I think he had so much other things that he was doing that was his own fault and his own doings, and seemingly not having a great life before then. It's like the before and after are still kind of full of mistakes and people looking down upon him. I don't think she has anything to do with it, but a fraction of a moment. Fraction of a moment in his entire life. But the main key thing there is he caused it. Why? Because he was assaulting her, and she had every right to walk away. No doubt. But I think that is a bigger subject, and when it comes to somebody taking their own lives, is that crappy thing about you could have done something more, even if sometimes a situation could be that you're not at fault and you did nothing wrong. I mean, I guess a good example of that is if somebody were to harm your family and you call the police and they got locked up, and because they got locked up, they lost custody of their kids or something like that, and then they ended their life. Is that your fault? Because they were doing something wrong and you didn't let it happen. No, it's not technically your fault. They were in the wrong. It's just that was a culmination of their wrongdoing that made their life miserable, and thus they took their life. Again, it's a crappy subject, but that's kind of where my mindset goes. They finally managed to rendezvous with Ginger. After they left Fort Karan, she had to rest and also find a replacement mount. After being caught up on what happened, her expression stiffened, as if she thought it was natural how things panned out. But then her face turned blank once more as she muttered, "Oh, I see." Rudius couldn't blame her for not being torn up about Pax. He had done terrible things to her, but that didn't make it less depressing. Again, I see both sides. Well then, Your Highness, what do you plan to do now? Zanoba hummed thoughtfully, considering the question. I assume you most likely intend to continue protecting the kingdom? Although Ginger's expression betrayed no emotion, her voice trembled slightly. With Pax dead, there was no longer anyone there who might threaten Zanoba's life. Yes, the next monarch may view him as a potential threat, but General Jade was a shrewd man. He wouldn't hold a grudge against Zanoba for Pax's misdeeds. Plus, he would see usefulness in having a blessed child on their side. There was still risks, but at least General Jade was someone who could be reasoned with. That's a sad reality. What is part of that? What did he just say that was a part of that? He will see usefulness in having a blessed child on their side. Why does Zanoba even come here?
I am a useful pawn for them. They kept me alive and kept me there because I'm a blessed child. I'm a puppet.
Yeah, let's do that again.
No, I will return to Shariah.
After pausing, Ginger nodded emphatically, suppressing a smile. Understood. She's so happy. Rudius always thought she wanted him to become a shining example of royalty, but it seemed like she was more interested in seeing him healthy and whole. That was a relief, honestly. Rudius had achieved his initial goal of keeping Zanoba alive, yet as he gazed at Zanoba's face, his stomach twisted.
Ginger, I'm considering abandoning my country.
Abandoning your country? Oh, you mean defecting. A fine idea. Renoa Kingdom would surely welcome you with open arms. Perhaps if Lord Rudius were to put in a good word, Ashra Kingdom might even...
No, I don't mean defecting. I am considering relinquishing my status as royalty. We'll let people think I died in the course of this rebellion, and I will return to Shariah, not as a third Prince Zanoba Sharon, a Sharon Kingdom, but simply as Zanoba. After that, I believe, is how I shall spend the rest of my days.
Ginger's face clouded over, probably disapproving. Rudius had no idea what it meant to discard your status like that. I think that's also a fine idea. To Rudius' surprise, she didn't oppose him. Zanoba lived a good life in Shiraya. He would only lose face by returning to Shiro now. Defecting to another kingdom would just lead to him being used as a blessed child. If these were the two options, maybe it was best to abandon the title and live as he wanted. Not being royalty anymore might be financially difficult, but Rudius would help him with that. He could become a specialized mechanic for the magic armor, paid with salary. If that didn't appeal to him, he can get him a job in their mercenary company instead. Yeah, he technically has a company. You can start, hiring him.
Indeed. Ginger, you have been a faithful retainer.
You honor me with those words. Zanoba nodded, looked pleased with himself. For her part, Ginger seemed relieved.
Having said all that, what do you plan to do now?
Why, I plan on continuing serving you, the way I always have. His brow furrowed.
You may be my personal guard, but you are a knight of Sharon. If I'm no longer a part of the royal family, then you have no reason to serve me any longer.
For me, it's hardly relevant whether you're part of the royal family or not.
But I won't be able to pay you. You realize? If I remember correctly, you have been forwarding your payments to your family, yes?
They have all since grown up and become independent. There's no one I need to financially support anymore.
You also realize that if you remain in my service for much longer, your chances for finding a suitable partner for marriage will wane.
Marriage? Ginger snapped, losing her patience. Her chin rose up as she lifted herself so that she was on both of her knees. She then threw her arms wide open before throwing herself forward, slamming her fists against the ground. It looked like she was prostrating herself. Lady Minerva made a direct request that I look after you. It doesn't matter whether you're royalty or not, nor do I care if I stay at your side in the capacity of a mistress instead of a knight. But I beg of you, if you're truly concerned for me, please keep me with you. She's gonna become a mistress now? Did she literally just say that I'll become your mistress? Holy crap. She's like, I'm just not getting married. I'm just gonna serve you. It kind of makes me think that this is some massive honor here. Like, she just was gonna serve him for the rest of, she made that promise. She's gonna stay at his side forever. Like, that is devoted right there. But there's a side of me that's like, yeah, I wonder if she's saying that I'm kind of open for that. Is she like him? Question mark. Reese couldn't hide his confusion. If he was correct, Minerva was the name of Zanoba's mother. Zanoba cupped his chin, as if considering her plea. He slowly crouched down and responded.
I hear you. Ginger, lift your head.
Ginger did as commanded, eyes shimmering with ushed tears.
If you're truly that insistent, I will not push you away against your will. However, I will also not treat you as a knight or even as a retainer. From now on, you will be my supporter. Understood?
Tears raced down her face. Yes, sir. She then lowered her head, prostrating herself once more. Reese couldn't decide if it was beautiful side or not. From the outside, it seemed surreal. In any case, Zanoba had decided to return home. Their mission was done. He couldn't say that it was pulled off without a hitch. They hadn't really solved any problems. The whole thing left a bad taste in his mouth. Not only was he despondent over his failures to save Pax, but it also seemed like all the effort they put into it had been for naught, leaving only stress. Lingering sentiments aside, it was over and done with. Time to go home. And that is chapter 11. Oh my gosh, this recording's gone on for way longer than I thought it would. Just for one chapter, but let's go. Chapter 12, Zanoba's Chosen Path. This is super interesting, so this is probably going to make this take much longer. Zanoba perspective moment. There was a time when he couldn't discern the difference between humans and dolls. The only difference was that one could speak. As he grew older, he was able to distinguish the difference between them more, but they still felt the same. If you swung a human around, parts would fly off, just like a wooden puppet. So yeah, that pretty much confirms that idea, that he just doesn't see the difference. And that would make sense why he was doing what he's doing. And they kind of implied that whole situation with the backstory of Zanoba. Seeing his brother. What? The whole wife thing. And again, they did technically get into the idea the wife said something inappropriate. Something he could not be forgiven. Again, I think that she was making fun of the Roxy doll figurine. Again, it's just, he doesn't see that difference. And everybody's saying they're different. And he's like, yeah, I can start to see difference. Like, these ones talk. These ones say terrible things I hate most of the time. There's difference. But they still seem the same. You fling this one around, it does the same thing. It's twisted. He loved dolls. Yes, some were made better than others, but he adored even inferior ones. In fact, the only type that he didn't like were humans. Despite being exactly like dolls, all they did was complain and try to rob him of his freedoms. He hated them. It wasn't until he met his master that his views on them had begun to change. Yeah, so it's saying basically this is all right here is up until the point that he met Rudius. They were the same, which makes sense to at least Zanoba, and I can see a warped mind, and even a lot of people just growing up, you're going to see dolls are made to look like humans. So there's a possibility that you could see they're the same thing. This one just moves and talks. This one just stays still and doesn't do anything. They both do the same thing when you fling them around. Makes sense, especially to someone that's so powerful that they can rip the limbs off of somebody by flinging them around. Just like the dolls. Even then, the shift was gradual. After his master left, he headed to the magic seat of Shiraya, where they were reunited. At some point in the years after, he stopped hating every single human. He suspected Julie was a catalyst for that. She was a slave they had picked out, intending to have her craft figurines. At first, she could neither speak nor take care of herself at all, making her a burden. But Master entrusted him with the task of looking after her. Though it troublesome, it was no different from crafting a figurine. To craft one, you had to whittle down a regular piece of wood until it took shape. Naturally, he resolved himself to be diligent with Julie's care, and taught her everything one step at a time. At some point during the process, she stopped being a burden. It made sense. She listened obediently and absorbed the skills that Master taught her quickly. He watched as she gradually transformed into exactly the kind of human that he did like. So, of course, he couldn't hate her. That's interesting. Now, again, that's a curious thing, because, again, when Ruiz departed with him, he left Sharon, went up to the refugee camp, eventually up to the north, and eventually they crossed paths again once they arrived at the University of Magic. But he was there before Rudius. He was obviously learning magic up there in order to be able to craft figurines, but I thought there was an aspect there that he was sort of keeping himself in check. Even though he hated humans, he was keeping himself in check because he wanted to focus on being able to stay there and learn that magic. And if he did something bad, he wouldn't be able to do that. He was trying to be prepared for the next time that he met Rudius. I need to learn Earth magic so that when I meet him again, he'll teach me those figurines. He promised them that. I was going to teach him how to do it. But it's so cool that, yes, we have this option now to make figurines because I can't do it myself. All right, we get this Julie. Gosh, she just can't do anything herself. She can't even talk, but she's absorbing everything. She's learning. And eventually she becomes exactly what he wants. This figurine maker that can take care of herself, and she's grown so much. All right, she's not telling me to do anything. She's not trying to take my freedoms. She likes dolls like me. She's making the dolls for me. She's perfect. She's perfect. Julie is perfect. He didn't realize that until Ginger came into the picture. From his perspective, Ginger was someone who always found fault in everything and never stayed quiet about it. She'd call the most irrelevant things important. For example, if they were talking about a tree, she would keep fussing over the state of the leaves and branches. And even if he'd argue the foundation was solid for the roots, she would never get the point that he was trying to make. Honestly, she was a pain in the neck. Nag, 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 nag. It wasn't until they met again in Shiraya that he stopped seeing her that way. She still complained incessantly, but somehow it didn't get under his skin. Why? Why did his feelings change so much? He knew it had to be his master's influence. He would never have abandoned Zanoba for anyone else. It didn't matter if he was clumsy, that all he had going for him was his strength, or that he would destroy his figurines as soon as he created them. It didn't matter to him that he lacked mana, or that he couldn't live up to his expectations. Nor did it seem like he resented him for all the desperate, wasted effort he poured into him to teach him his secret figurine crafting techniques. Zanoba had nearly given up on his dream. He was convinced he would never make figurines himself. That it was a skill reserved for the gods. His master didn't throw in the towel, tried all kind of methods to teach him, tried to find some way to include him in the process, and Zanoba was grateful. I can see that. I think it gave us a lot of indication about that. I think he definitely seen that. And that was kind of what he brought up later on with the whole thing with the automated doll. I want to help you somehow. Let me do this thing. I think I can do it. It's going to take me longer than you. You'd figure it out really quickly, but I want to do something. I want to do something for you. Up until that point, not a single person in his life ever truly looked to Zanoba as a person. Had it not been for his master, he probably would have never realized Ginger was just looking out for him. That's cool to think about, because again, over here, Ginger's just nagging. He keeps nagging that I did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. But I think because Rudius, when he met Rudius was involved in something that he wanted. Okay, now we're working together. Over here, she's nagging about things that he doesn't care about. Here, Rudius is working with him. And then suddenly he realizes, okay, he's trying to work all these things out to figure things out. So now I realize that she's just trying to help me with things that I don't really find useful. So she's just trying to help me. Rudius was helping me. And it was something I realized because I liked the thing that he was helping me with. Oh, it's the same as when she's trying to help me with things and nagging about things. Okay, maybe she is trying to help me. Just like Rudius was. Foolish as Zanoba was, it was only then that he finally understood the difference between dolls and humans. He knew it was important to make that distinction, but once again, being a fool, he didn't understand why. Only that it was important. So again, he's not making the connection there. He just realized it's important. Master didn't spell it out for him. He led by example to help him realize that himself. He owed Master for guiding him, and he respected him for it too. In fact, he was even proud of himself for having a foresight to recognize him as his master. It's actually interesting. He could have missed his opportunity to really get all this if he never recognized Rudius as something other than a doll. Ever the buffoon, he unfortunately didn't understand some of his master's actions. Lady Nanahoshi, the girl known as Silent Seven Star, Shizuka Nanahoshi, was one such example. She appeared to be studying summoning magic as a method of returning to her home. No one had ever elaborated on exactly where that home was, but he had no interest in knowing. He only had bad memories of his own home. He couldn't empathize at all with her intense desire to return to where she came from. From what Zanoba had heard, his master's own memories of his home in Asura Kingdom were largely bitter. In spite of that, he devoted himself to helping Lady Nanahoshi. When she broke down, he dragged her to his home and looked after her. When she was deathly sick, he traveled the demon continent to search for a way to heal her. This is interesting, because yeah, I kind of wondered if they ever learned about that. If they ever... Again, he's technically saying he didn't care. Like, they were saying that he wanted to return home, but she's like, where? I don't care. So he could have been... They could have talked about it. Like, maybe Cliff knows. They could have talked about the idea that she's trying to do summoning to get to another world. And I think they've probably emphasized that. But I think Zanoba himself, he doesn't care, so he's not picking up on it. He's like, I don't know what they're talking about. They're talking about her going, I don't know, I don't care. I don't need the details. Not listening. But they could have been told that she is trying to return to another world. But it is interesting to note here that he doesn't know. Right? At this point, similar to what we talk about later, he doesn't know. But what stood out to me was that he specifically says, apparently Master's own memories of his home in Asura Kingdom were largely bitter. I'm wondering if he's picking... I mean, he could obviously be picking up on... Because when Rudius first came to the university, he was in a state of depression because of what happened with Edis. So he could have been picking up on the idea that when Rudius came back here, his memories of his hometown wasn't good. But I'm wondering if he was also picking up on the idea of his previous life. Because they've talked a few times about his situation. I mean, for example, I think with the whole situation with Rudius and Nanahoshi and him bringing Nanahoshi to his place, he was saying that he had a similar experience as Nanahoshi. And Zanoba would have listened to that. And I think what he did there was connect what Rudius was telling him about his connection with what Nanahoshi's going through as, yes, his homeland, his old life, not his old world. Interesting. When she was deathly sick, Rudius traveled to the demon continent to search for a way to heal her. Zanoba helped out too, but only because it didn't bother him to do so. If his master was doing something and it meant helping him, he didn't have to think twice. But that didn't change the fact that he didn't understand why his master was helping her. It's like Zanoba's so nice to go there, and it makes sense. Again, if Rudius says, I'm jumping,
Can I go too, Master?
not so much, I'm jumping to help this person.
Can I jump with you, Master?
You want to help him too?
I don't know who that is. Can I jump too, Master?
It's going to really hurt when we hit the ground, but it will help them out. Do you still want to jump?
I don't know. Are you doing it? Can it help you? Can I cushion the blow?
It's so great. It was in the midst of all this that something within Zanoba changed. At some point, he began developing some attachment to his own birthplace. There were some days when he'd find himself intensely nostalgic for Sharon's palace, in spite of how awful it had been. Nanahoshi was always talking about her home, so he could only assume that rubbed off on him. That was likely why he immediately felt compelled to answer Pax's summon. He did genuinely love his country, and wanted to protect it if the need ever rose. So when it did, he felt like he had to go. He was wrong. When at Fort Karan, when his master tried to persuade him to return home, his heart wavered, and he considered it. His days were so fulfilling and enjoyable back in Shiraya, making figures with his master, enough that he honestly considered abandoning his homeland for it, but he couldn't do it. It was like a wall went up, saying he couldn't go back.
Pax is my brother, so I want to save him.
That was nothing more than an excuse he blurted out in the moment. Fooled me, Refugian, you fooled me. But it's so weird because it's not really. It's not really. It was a calculated move, since he knew it was one thing that would surely convince Master. Yet somehow, that answer also resonated with Zanoba. He didn't know why. He'd heard before that if you speak a lie, sometimes you end up believing it yourself. He thought at first maybe that was it, but it wasn't. It wasn't until Pax jumped from the balcony and Zanoba saw his remains that he realized the truth. You knew this was coming. You knew this was coming. You knew this was coming. It brought a memory from the distant past back to the forefront of his mind. His elder brother, the second prince, had been hosting a party, and Zanoba was invited. He didn't remember what the party was for, but it was a type where an attendance was mandatory. Still, Zanoba didn't remember if he actually attended or not. I like how it says that, but then it says what happened there. The one thing he remembered was that, by pure coincidence, the young Pax had been seated right beside him. This was before Lady Roxy began serving at the palace. Pax could not have been more than 10 at the time. They didn't talk, only sat next to each other. Zanoba sensed Pax wanted to speak to him, but he couldn't be bothered to engage in small talk. He didn't even glance Pax's way, and Pax never worked up the courage to speak to him. I hate regrets. I hate regrets. Even though he never said anything to him, in a way, he ignored Pax. As Zanoba cradled his dead body in his arms, he couldn't help but think, why didn't I say anything to him back then? Even a word or two. That dispelled any doubt that he had. He finally understood. His own puzzling actions mirrored that of his master's. It made sense why Master helped Lady Nanahoshi now. He'd likely seen her as a little sister. Why hadn't he realized sooner? Master had 2 biological sisters, and the way he interacted with Lady Nanahoshi was clearly identical to how he treated the older of his 2 siblings. He kept a watchful eye on her, and if there was any trouble, he jumped in to help her. He took care of her tenderly, as he did his real sisters. Zanoba had been asking so many questions himself. Why did he help Master in the Demon Continent? Why did he find himself recalling his homeland afterward? Why, when Pax's letter arrived, did he shake off the opposition of those around him and resolved himself to return home? In the wake of the Battle of Fort Karan, why did he feel compelled to rescue Pax? Why did he blurt out a lie about wanting to save him because they were family? And finally, why did that lie resonate so much? He finally understood the answer. It all made sense. The puzzle pieces fell into place. But it was too late. That was his folly. Realizing too late, Pax was dead. They weren't able to save him like they did in Nanahoshi. Even so, there was still something left that he could do. I hate Pax. Shut up. I hate Pax. Shut up. It's crazy, that realization moment. It's like, he's literally saying, I did this stuff because it mattered. I did these things because it mattered to me. And yes, it's a lot of the influence of Rudius. Rudius showed him how to be protective, to be caring, to care about those around him. So it's technically like a lot of the statements that he made is true. Like, he didn't lie. Things now suddenly matter to him. But the sucky thing is it's too late. The too late thing. But I think there's growth in that. I think there's a massive amount of growth there in, I won't do that again. I won't make the same mistake. I mean, it does eventually lead, coming up here, to I want to help get revenge. I will take down who killed my brother. And that's what it is here. It's literally, he says, I realized too late. Pax is dead. I couldn't save him like we saved Nanahoshi, but I could still do something. And that is to take down who killed him. Again, assuming that the man god's involved, and that's what they're doing. Rudius told him, yeah, probably it's man god. Okay, well, I'm gonna take him down. It's just so much oof. So much oof. Just so much oof. That's the worst part of it. I mean, it doesn't even have to be in a case of somebody in their life. It's just that aspect of the regrets. I wish I could have said something. I wish I'd talked to them more. I wish we could have talked. I almost thought it was going to go in the direction of Zanoba blaming himself for where Pax goes, because it does bring up this is what happened before Roxy showed up, but it doesn't really go there. It just said that we never talked, and I wish I did. But I like that mirror. I like what he says there. My own puzzling actions mirrored that of my master's. I did exactly what Rudius did with Nanahoshi. And why Rudius did that with Nanahoshi in his mind is because Nanahoshi is like a sister. And so if I'm doing the same thing that Rudius is doing, it obviously means that I care for Pax as a sibling. Because Rudius did the same thing for Nanahoshi that he thinks is connected to his sisters, his relationship. So it's obviously the same. It's like he's discovering that compassion and that desire. It's like he's discovering sibling love. So that's what it is. He can't put it into words. Like there's almost like there's a thread there that's broken that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know what this means. He's literally discovering love. He's literally discovering sibling love. He just doesn't know that's what it means. It's super painful, especially after the fact, that he couldn't realize before. Cutting back to Rudius' perspective, they made it back to Shiraya. The return trip was smooth, pulling a carriage with magic armor, disassembling it, and teleporting it to the floating fortress. As Roxy went on ahead, Rudius and Zanoba paid their respects to Petagus. Yeah, I was kind of curious about that. So he's going to let him back on it again? He said a curt, "I see," when first seeing them, and then they filled him in on what happened. Afterwards, he guided them to the room they last spoke in, and offered words of wisdom.
It's foolish to let any country tie you down.
Zanoba nodded earnestly, and said that he was abandoning his royal status, which left Petagus looking pleased. He even offered Rudius some encouragement, saying that he did well. Petagus is super happy. Petagus is super happy. Good. You're leaving that stupid country. Yeah, good job, Rudius. You did good. You brought back my friend. Honestly, Rudius was relieved that he hadn't lost his friend he enjoyed sipping tea with. They also stopped by to visit Nanahoshi, who reacted to their return with a drawn-out sigh. Rudius could honestly understand her exasperation. Zanoba coming back ruined any sentimentality she felt during their teary-eyed, heartfelt farewell. He ruined everything. Edis was due to deliver within the next month, so he wanted to be there for it. But he needed to finish something first. Report to Orsted. The man god had really pulled the carpet out from under him this time. On the plus side, he succeeded in his goal of returning Zanoba home safely, and he didn't die or get maimed. The downside is they learned nothing of the man god's goals this time, and failed to keep Pax alive. It's kind of surprising just how big this is, because it didn't really get into details before. And in Rudius, it kind of points out that, like, can I get more information here? Because, for a reminder, when Orsted talked about Pax making it a republic, what did he say? All he said at the time was that it becoming a republic, eventually somebody will be born there that will be a nuisance to the man god. That's it. A nuisance going to be born there. That's it. To the man god. Not an ally to Orsted, which it kind of is puzzling, because I think at some point Rudius says, oh yeah, an ally of Orsted is going to be born there. No, he never said that. Someone that's going to be a nuisance to the man god will be born there. That's it. Not an ally. Not somebody that's going to stand at Orsted's side. Nothing. So what's so important about it? And it's pretty surprising. And honestly, in my opinion, not really a big deal, but it sort of does make sense. It actually just says right here. Orsted had already told Rudius that someone pivotal to his plans will be born in the Ch11 Republic. I don't remember him saying at any other point that he was pivotal to his plans. Just that he would be a nuisance to the man god. Cause him a headache, that's what it said. Maybe it was another line somewhere else and I forgot. Which meant that he lost a powerful piece on the board because of this. It was an utter defeat. Perhaps their return was a bit premature. They could stay a little bit longer to influence things so that it becomes a republic. Now, if it was that easy to make it a republic, then Orsted wouldn't have wanted Pax alive. That makes sense. It's like, yeah, like I said, technically they could possibly get them to take Zanoba, but then again, Zanoba doesn't want to be there. And again, they're not going to accept that. Regardless, it was probably best to be honest with how it turned out. If there was any way to compensate for this setback, Rudius would do so. After parting ways with Roxy, Zanoba and Rudius headed to the office. For some reason, Zanoba decided to tag along with them. We already knew what this was going to be. I already knew at this point, yep, he's going there to become a member of the Orsted Corporation. Something wrong?
No, but that armor helped keep me alive, so I thought I would thank Orsted for lending it to me, and apologize to him for having destroyed it on our journey.
Oh, okay. It was odd that Zanoba wanted to thank Orsted directly. Rudius figured Orsted's curse would be potent enough to snuff out any positive emotions. Perhaps this sudden change was courtesy of Cliff's research. Maybe Zanoba might start throwing punches once they came face to face with Orsted, but as long as Rudius held them back, everything would surely work out. Feeling confident, they headed to the office, stowed the magic armor, and went to the main building. After arriving at Boss's office, Rudius sucked in a deep breath before going inside. He was about to report a failure after all. Not like he hadn't failed numerous times before, but this one was considerably larger failure than the others. Orsted may reprimand him for it. He sort of hoped that he'd be out of the office today. He knocked beforehand, figuring being courteous would brighten the mood.
Rudius,
So much for him not being in. Despite his anxiety, he already mapped out his explanation. Stick to the truth and be honest. Pardon the intrusion. I, Rudius Greyrat, have at last made my return from Ch11 Kingdom. Rudius barged in and bowed deeply. When he straightened back up, a strange cry escaped his throat. Orsted was wearing a black, full-faced helmet. This new face, or rather magical implement, must be a newly crafted one by Cliff.
seems you have returned safe and sound.
Yes. His appearance took the wind out of his sails, but he carried on. He had to give the most sincere, accurate report of his mission's failure. Sir Orsted, I achieved absolutely, positively nothing. Hold up. That didn't seem right. Allow me to give you my report. Rudius gave his breakdown on what transpired. He noted all things he had been wary of, plus signs he hadn't noticed at the time. He'd break down each event, what he had felt about it, and what he thought about it, who he consulted about it, what conclusions he drew, and what actions he took. Then, he told Orsted the results. He also included what he suspected the man god's motivations were, and how he thought best to proceed in relation to that. I offer my most sincerest apologies. I failed to fulfill my duty, thereby allowing Prince Pax's death. A suffocating gloom filled the air. And Rudius couldn't read his expression under the helmet. That only made things several times more terrifying than usual. It made Rudius prefer him without the helmet. He's going to say his face is scary. Now the helmet's scary. Why was he even wearing that helmet anyways?
The King Dragon Realm's king, Leonardo Dragon King, is one of the man god's disciples. Most likely, General Jade of the Ch11 Kingdom is one as well. He manipulated the two of them in order to drive Pax into a corner, forcing him to commit suicide.
So, two involved this time. The man god used King Dragon Realm's monarch to support Pax, which then instilled in Pax the idea to live up to the king's expectations, lest he become a failure once again. The king gifted him a queen and a death god, which gave him every advantage. But at the height of it all, the man god used Jade to orchestrate Pax's fall. Kind of makes you want to have this told to Roxy. At least Zanoba is here to hear it. That was Rudius' read of the situation anyways. If the man god really could see the future, then he knew what pieces to use to coax Pax's death. Yeah, and that was something I never really brought up while we were talking about this stuff, is the idea of why go through all this? Like, I even mentioned at some point, I kind of agreed the idea of why not just kill Pax at the King Dragon Realm? Destiny is still a problem. Destiny is still the issue. It's not so easy as the man god saying, yeah, have somebody just kill him. Have somebody just off him right there. Because again, the Destiny might keep that from happening. He's got to orchestrate a series of events that will lead it to do something. It's got to slowly veer it off course. Pax could have a strong Destiny. Again, every loop, it seems like Pax makes the Republic. So obviously, they probably have a very strong Destiny. Because again, the man god doesn't want that. So it makes sense that they would have to do something very long and drawn out to cause his death. So who was the last disciple then?
Perhaps the king of the Besta Kingdom, although there's a good possibility he didn't employ a third.
Oh, come to think of it, the Death God did mention that Demon King Bodigadi might have once been one of his disciples. Yeah, that's interesting. Again, based on that one chapter, the third should be Geese. And again, it makes sense to my opinion that I think that Geese is orchestrating this because it's very well thought out.
If he was a disciple this time, it wouldn't make sense for him to show himself.
It was true. Bodigadi was a type that liked to be in the spotlight. Yeah, it's true. Can you imagine that? Yeah, the whole scene where Pax is flipping out and he's just talking and yelling at Roxy, and then suddenly out of nowhere,
I come in with a bang. Relax, Pax. Here, you want a drink? Let's celebrate. You're being overthrown. Let's celebrate. Blah.
So, I'm sorry. As far as the man god was concerned, Rudius was an irregularity, so it was likely that he would actively pick people he wasn't likely to have met. Alas, Rudius failed to figure the man god out this time, so he felt pathetic. We could still take Jade out if you want.
It's too late.
I'm really very sorry about this.
I made an incorrect prediction from the start. After I disposed of Leonardo, I should have gone to Ch11 Kingdom personally, rather than leaving everything up to you. That was my mistake. However,
his voice trailed off. I mean, it makes sense. I'm like, I was like, there's a part of me that's like, I kind of want to look forward to this Leonardo guy. Like, they have this king of the King Dragon Realm. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be cool. Who's this guy? Oh, he's dead. Now, granted, that's what I was predicting. That he's like, yeah, I'll go there and I'll kill him. I'll just kill the dude. But still, it's like, that was a little bit of a letdown. I was kind of hoping to meet them. But I wonder if that will lead. I don't know why that would happen unless Orsted literally killed everybody in the King Dragon Realm. It's a possibility. If he killed the king, there's a chance that he may have been indirectly or would actually directly kill everybody else, or at least the others that are in line. Which makes me wonder, which is really weird, might not actually happen, if Benedict will then take the throne. Or have the child, and that child leads the kingdom. That's a stretch, but it wouldn't put it past anything. If they're the remaining of the bloodline, it could. If that kingdom takes bloodline to be pretty much above all else. His voice trailed off. It didn't seem like he was going to comfort Rudius or tell him not to worry about it. Apparently his failure in this was rather far-reaching. Isn't there anyone else who could serve as a replacement for Pax?
No.
There's really no other option? Orsa didn't respond. It made Rudius wonder if Ch11 Republic was really that important to his plans. Trying to get him to consider another pass, he dismissed it twice now, so Rudius tried to figure out a way to salvage it.
Sir Orsted, would you mind if I spoke?
Rudius looked at Zanoba, who was standing behind him. He thought that he was outside, but he must have came in and remained silent.
Zanoba Ch11,
Orsted spoke as if he didn't notice Zanoba being there. He probably couldn't see anything in front of him with that helmet on. In fact, the realization hit Rudius that he was finally able to speak with that thing on. That had to mean that he actually could breathe in it, unlike before.
Firstly, allow me to extend my heartfelt gratitude to you for lending me armor to use during my foray to my homeland. It was unfortunately destroyed in the process, but happily, it preserved my life.
Zanoba stepped forward and bowed. While Rudius couldn't read Orsa's expression, he assumed Orsa had put the helmet on because he sensed Zanoba had a ride with him.
If you wish to thank anyone, it should be Rudius. Is that all you wish to say? No, it isn't.
While Rudius only thought Zanoba came to speak to Orsted, he was advancing a step, as if trying to exude his own intimidating air.
Judging by your conversation with Master just now, I take it Pax was caught in the middle of your battle with this enemy. Is that interpretation correct? It sounded to me as though you were trying to save my younger brother. Is that correct? It isn't. I wasn't particularly trying to save him, no. What I wanted was a person who would be born in the country your brother would build. And you wanted someone who would be born there?
Orsa was being more cryptic than usual. Rudius wanted to know more about this, as they'd be able to rectify the situation. If at all possible, I think we'd be able to appreciate a more detailed explanation, please. After a while of silence, Orsa sucked in a deep breath from inside the helmet. Normally, that would have eased the tension, but Rudius sensed anger in the way that he gulped in the air. His anxiety ratcheted up.
After becoming king, Pax Ch11 would have created a republic. After Ch11 became a republic, a man who once became a slaver would rise to prominence. A man by the name of Bolt Macedonius. Pax would have appointed this man to an important position. Bolt Macedonius would go on to be an authority of the republic and put down roots there.
So what role does he play?
Bolt himself plays no role in my plans, but one of his descendants gives birth to the demon god Laplace. Now that Pax is dead, I have no idea where Laplace will be born.
I literally don't find this to be a problem. I literally don't find this to be a problem. And I've been saying this for a while now. I've literally been saying this for a while now. The way they've been putting this is that the rebirth happens when all of these aspects that have been spread out slowly come together. And eventually one person will be born with all his aspects, presumably, and then that person will be Laplace. And again, Rudius is throwing a massive wrench in this. Him being in this world, he's at least brought 3 people together. Rudius has an aspect. Sylphie has an aspect. Now, granted, Rudius, the real Rudius, was supposed to die, but you would think that his aspect goes to somebody else. Sylphie never got with anybody, so eventually she would pass away, or maybe live on beyond then with that aspect. How does it all come together is the question mark that still remains, because you would assume that there's a possibility Sylphie will outlive this whole situation, but she could die at some point, and that aspect goes to somebody else. So the assumption here, Rudius dying, Sylphie dying, those aspects then go to the descendant that's going to be born in Ch11 Republic. But again, Rudius is creating a massive anomaly here. I honestly don't think they would be born there. So is this really an issue? That's the question mark. Unless this system works completely different than I'm thinking. Maybe the aspect doesn't need to be moved over. Maybe it's just Rudy's just got one, but it still would be born with it even if Rudy stayed alive. But it does make sense why he's so bothered by this. I knew exactly where he'd be. Now I gotta waste time finding him. He can build up. In that case, we can still make Sharona a republic. Or we can at least make sure that Bolt Macadenius meets the partner he's supposed to, so that he can still marry and have kids.
It's pointless. Do you truly think I haven't tried that before?
No doubt Orsted had tried all sorts of things in the long loops that he'd been stuck in. Apparently Laplace's rebirth was a really unpredictable wild card, which is why Orsted was hoping to pin it down and make it easier to locate him. Ruiz suspected that the Sharone Republic wasn't the only domino required for this part. He'd probably been orchestrating things for hundreds of years to make sure Laplace was reborn there. That makes perfect sense there. Again, that was what he kind of needs. That ensures where it's at. And yes, he's probably been doing a lot of things to make sure that it all builds to that. He could have been working on relatives, parents, grandparents of this Macedonius. But it kind of insinuates here that there is a chance that it wouldn't make a republic, and I think it kind of implied this is something he always goes to do. I guess he just maybe has failed in the past and he just didn't mention it. Which, yes, right here is a stomach punch. Because again, I think right now Orsted is super happy. We're doing so much stuff. Rudius being a part of this is changing so much stuff. I'm about to get rid of my curse, or at least cover it up, so I can at least communicate to people. And Rudius is doing things that I normally have to kind of, triage. That's not as important as this, so I'm going to have to do this, and this is just going to happen. He's having to figure all this stuff out, and Rudius is helping him. He's giving things for him to do. He's a very powerful ally for him. This is a great loop. This will be the one. We can do this. And now I lost that part. Many of Rudius's other missions had perhaps played a hand in this as well, but with one element gone awry, the entire house of cards had collapsed.
Reaching the man god requires I first kill Laplace. After he reincarnates, he'll spend a little while lying low before gathering his comrades and starting a war. At that point, it would require significant effort and mana to dispose of him and his followers, and then I'll have to face the man god immediately afterwards.
That's interesting. I don't remember if they've actually mentioned that before, but yes, obviously, Laplace is one of these dragon generals. He would obviously have one of the keys in order for him to do that. Which, again, I kind of still wonder how exactly that works. Like, if that is that key, like, just simply an item or whatever. Like, they have to produce it. Or is it simply they possibly have to die in order for that key to be presented? Older Rudius didn't get a chance to get that all done, but he did figure that out. That these are required in order to get to the Barren Lands, to get to the Man God. So right here, it is technically Orsted admitting, I need to get rid of him in order to get to him. But it's interesting that he's saying, I have to do it right after. Because if Laplace is born pretty close to the point in which Orsted is going to reset, yes, he will have to immediately go in there. Once he's born, I take him out, and I have to immediately go in there because I don't have much time left. But again, I think he's not really thinking about the fact that possibly Rudius being here will cause this to happen earlier. Or they figure out how to get the Man God without having to use Laplace. There's also still my theory that the Man God is technically tied to Laplace. Like they're connected somehow. So it would make sense that possibly killing Laplace will just maybe summon the Man God or possibly manifest him in some way. So there's no option to defeat Laplace. Take some of your time recovering mana and then face off with him.
Laplace's reincarnation is largely set in stone. It always happens near the end of the loop.
It's right there. Like I said, sometimes I forget that these stuff are mentioned.
I have attempted to usher in his rebirth sooner, but to no avail.
Rudius did offer to make tons of babies. He did offer to make tons of babies. That'll do something. Too bad 2 of his wives have problems having children. Too bad 2 of the wives take a lot in order to get pregnant. I bet that's Destiny trying to prevent him from having children to not mess with the births and to bring Laplace forward early. I wonder if the reason why it's so difficult for Rudius to have kids with his wives is because of Destiny. Orsted let out a breathy sigh.
Going through a war like that means I won't be able to reach the Man God. This loop is a failure.
A failure. The word echoed in Rudius' brain and bounced around. The scumbag inside him screamed back. Well then, why didn't you come to Sharone if it's so damn important? But Rudius kept silent. Orsted entrusted this mission to him, and he failed. This had been a test to see how useful he was. That must mean he was done for then. Orsted was probably going to be fed up with him. He'd probably give up on this loop. But if he does, Where did that leave Rudius? What about his family? There is so much in this little spot. There is so much in this spot. I love it. That first part, failure. A word that literally echoes in his mind, bounces around. And that scumbag inside of him, his old self, is literally like, if it was so damn important, why didn't you do it? You're going to say that I'm a failure? I failed you? You should have done it. If it was that important, you should have done it. Like, there's that side of inside of him that's like, don't judge me. Like, he's literally screaming out, don't judge me. It's so interesting. But no, I like it because his new self, this Rudius, is going, no, he trusted me to do this. Like, I was supposed to do this. I was supposed to help him. Again, his new self that is being protected by Orsted. No, don't get mad in there. No, Orsted is helping me. He's keeping my family safe. I try to kill him, and in return, he's now helping me, and he's keeping me safe from this man god that's trying to kill me. I failed my boss. He entrusted this to me, and I failed. I like that. His old self would probably get angry and mad that he's being judged, but his new self is taking responsibility for himself. That's the key thing. This Rudius, the new Rudius, is taking responsibility for his actions. But then it goes to that later part. What the hell happens now? Does he give up on this loop? It's a failure. I won't be able to do it. I'm going to run out of mana, and I'm going to fail to beat the man god. It's over. Wrap it up. Literally, he just like takes off the helmet, whatever. I'm going to go find a corner and just sit there until the rest of this entire loop is done. It's over. Game over. Reset the match. It's a logical conclusion that Orsted comes to. He's done this a ton of times. Hundreds. He said, I stopped counting at 100. He's used to it. And yes, I still believe that he's kind of like crap. This one seemed like it'd work. This one, will I have Rudius next time? Because this is working out really well. Like, this could have been the one. He got excited. I don't know, it makes you kind of wonder, would he be excited? Would he let himself think that he's got it? And what does that mean for Rudius? He's given up. He literally just sits down in the corner and says, all right, just wait for the loop. I'm done. I know, we can't beat him. What happens for Rudius? What happens to his family? Now the man god can come after him, and Orsted's not going to protect him. He doesn't care. Everything here is waste. I'm not going to sit here and protect you for the rest of the loop because oh, what difference does it make? I'm going to reset anyways. It's kind of scary. I can see Rudius right here literally going, crap, I'm done for. If Orsted gives up, I'm screwed. I'm dead. I joined Orsted. The man god's going to come after me. Time to pull out a knife and stab the Orsted before the man god comes after me and he gives up.
It's a bit hasty to call it a failure at this point.
Rudius wondered if Zanoba missed something in what Orsted said. Maybe he's confused by all the talk about the future and what's to come.
If a war is coming, and we must take down Laplace and his followers, then that means we should start preparing forces of our own to combat them.
Oh.
We don't have to put together an entire army, but surely we can begin gathering comrades powerful enough to stand toe-to-toe with Laplace.
I was thinking he was going to say,
I'm going to make you automatons, an army of automatons.
I'm still going back to that one theory that I had of like the whole thing with the Battle of Ostra Kingdom and stuff. Zanoba said something good there. His plan made sense too. If the main issue was Orsted losing mana, then all they had to do was make sure that Orsted didn't have to fight. It's a very good point. Again, my whole concern there was that if it's too close to the end of the loop. But yeah, that makes sense. All you got to do is just build up an army. Make a group of people that can take them down. Get a bunch of very powerful people. Again, my assumption is that this is way late in the whole thing. Because again, he makes a republic. At some point, he entrusts somebody. So again, we're still in the timeline of Pax. And then that person has that child. So you would assume that Laplace is going to be showing up here at least within... But he says descendant. So that could be a son, or it could be a grandson, or a great-grandson. So that's a problem there, is that it can still technically be somebody several generations later. And again, that could be beyond Rudius and Zanoba's lifespan. But again, all the idea is here is to, again, probably through that company that Rudius has created, make a company that will have people that will eventually serve Orsted in fighting a threat. And again, it's just like what Orsted's been doing with Rudius this whole time. I fought you. I need you to beat up things so that I can regenerate my mana. Because, again, at that point, he was probably preparing himself for the moment that he's going to be fighting the man god. Zanoba's smart. It's like, you talk about war, Zanoba's like, peaked. Oh, I can help with this. I can strategize war.
I understand that your curse makes it hard to gather such comrades yourself, but you have my master to assist you, and I will aid you as well.
Zanoba took a few steps forward. before taking a knee and lowering his head.
Though my proposal is based on what I understand from our short conversation, I won't deny that it may be off base.
It was a good call, even if they didn't know if it'd pan out or not. Orsted claimed Laplace's rebirth was fairly consistent in all loops. They had around 80 years to build up strong allies. No, there is them again. Again. People like the Death God or Pedagoose, who they can pin against Laplace when he returned. That would leave Orsted unscathed for the battle to follow. I mean, yeah, Pedagoose literally wants to kill him, so that's an easy. But I don't know he wants to work with anybody, but you can at least tell him where it's at. Hey, he's over here. There you go, you saved your mana. There you go, you saved your mana. And yes, technically, Oldius said that Pedagoose killed him. So, yeah, he didn't need the Man God. Again, I was predicting in that future Rudius timeline, Orsted died.
I don't know the precise details of the situation, but I have heard the two of you have combined forces to battle this Man God, as you call him. This Man God.
Zanoba paused, lifted his chin, stared directly up at Orsted, then slapped his hands against the ground.
He is the one who killed my younger brother.
Zanoba pressed his forehead against the floor, prostrating himself. At least he did it less violently than usual.
I beg you, allow me to be one of your subordinates as well, Sir Orsted.
There was silence for a moment.
I want to avenge my brother.
Orsted's neck turned, ever so slightly, to Rudius. He was pretty sure that he couldn't see anything while wearing it, but perhaps he wanted Rudius to weigh in. With Zanoba on our side, we could make better progress with the magic armor. I think the suggestion that he made a moment ago was smart too. This failure has admittedly increased our future workload, and even one more pair of helping hands would...
Very well.
Orsted interrupted, not even letting Rudius finish. He nodded and rose to his feet, seemingly looking to Zanoba.
In that case, I would have you work on Rudius and take orders from him. If you propose we make more allies, then that is what we shall do.
Yes, sir. With that, Rudius had a new co-worker, and Orsted a new subordinate. Pax was dead, and Chiron would not become a republic. These two facts had largely derailed Orsted's plan. They lost an enormous amount of progress, all because of Rudius' incorrect decisions. On the flip side, they gained Zanoba as an ally. Rudius had no idea what it meant for the bigger picture, but at least his magic armor would see steady improvements with Zanoba at their side. He had to wonder if he was proving beneficial to Orsted or not. From what he had told him, all of his effort up to this point had given him breathing room, but it felt like his failure this time had undone it all. Perhaps he was becoming less of a help and more of a hindrance. Would his efforts in the future be enough to compensate for this? No, they had to be. He needed to make sure they are. Otherwise, there would be no meaning to Orsted rescuing him from the Man God's clutches. Besides, while Orsted might be able to casually abandon this loop for the next, Rudius had this single lifetime. It was a miracle that he got a do-over, and it was unlikely that he'd get lucky enough for another. Even if he got another chance to live as Rudius Greyrat all over again, he wanted to live this life he had right now to the fullest. He had already burdened Orsted with this screw-up. If he impeded him any further, he might start seeing him as a destructive interloper, instead of simply a useless nitwit, and cut him down completely. That's the other thing, is like, he might actually see him as a threat. Because if he says that he no longer wants to work with Rudius, that he's useless, there's a good chance that Rudius will then accept the Man God's choice there again and come after him again. So he'd probably be willing to kill him. Rudius had to suck it up and do a good job now. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a next time. Should Orsted decide that he did more harm than good, then in the next loop, Rudius might get used by the Man God again to find a way back to the past, only for his younger self to be pitted against Orsted and killed. That's a stretch right there. I think what it's basically implying there is that he's not going to get help by Orsted. The Man God's going to, he says, find a way back to the past. Like, use Aldius's technology of a magic of time travel to go back and fight Orsted. I wonder if it's implying there to kill Orsted right when he's actually born. Assuming Orsted didn't decide to kill him sooner, that is. He could snuff him out while he was still a child in Buena Village. Or after he started working as Edis' tutor. Or even after he ventured back to the Austria Kingdom after being teleported to the Dion continent. The Dion continent. There's a Selene Dion continent? Yeah, they did it. My gosh. There's some of these where I'm like, it can't be that. There's no way that's like that. There ain't no way in hell. The Dion continent. It's a Celine Dion continent. By the way, thank you, 7 Seas. Damn it, 7 Seas. Damn it, 7 Seas. I don't know, that's almost like the worst. It's almost like the worst. Like, spell check will find that. Like, spell check, my spell check on my screen right here finds that. Whatever. Or even after venturing back to the Austria Kingdom after being transported to the, I'll say it again, Demon Continent. What he decided next time depended on what happened this time. Orsted was being kind to him now. He was sure there was a multitude of reasons for that, but it was probably a calculative move on his part. He couldn't forget that Orsted was always contemplating his next loop. It was perfectly possible he was feeling Ruius out to see what pleased him and what didn't. During this mission, Ruius had been too dependent on Orsted as usual. Somewhere inside, he convinced himself that as long as he obeyed Orsted's command, he'd swoop in and rescue him if he got in a tight spot. That things would just magically work out. A part of him genuinely believed that. He couldn't help leaning on Orsted like a crutch. Ruius swore to himself that he wouldn't anymore. I think you've said that before. I want to say that he's said that before. But I don't know. Newfound purpose. Gonna push this time. Gonna actually do it this time. I don't know. We'll see. But that is chapter 12. My gosh, how long did this go? I don't know. This might be a beefy episode. That's fine though. I was like, I'm gonna return to two chapters again. It's gonna be a shorter, and it ends up being as long. We'll see. But yeah, that's great little realization there for Rudius. Again, I think there's a lot more to Orsted than that. I think Orsted does care for Rudius and his family now at this point. And again, I think he really does like what Rudius has done to help him out, and this has been like a great thing for him. And I think a lot of the issue that Orsted have right now is like, this was the one. This was the one. This is the one where we're doing so much better, and I have Rudius as an ally, and he's doing so much good stuff for me. He's giving me breathing room and everything. Things are looking up. I'm improving myself. I got this helmet thing that's helped me be able to actually communicate to people. All this stuff. He's getting excited, and then failure. But yeah, it sucks still. Again, I do think that Zanoba thankfully has a good point to put in there. Like, we'll just handle it. This is still a good thing. We can still kind of save this, which I think is cool, because I knew that Zanoba coming there, he was going to say, let me join you guys. But I didn't expect it to turn into a thing where Zanoba literally does offer a benefit to it. It's not simply, please, he killed my brother. It's, we're going to do this. Here's a plan. Let me present you with something to help you out. And yes, it makes sense. Zanoba leading that is great, because Zanoba is very tactful. Like, he's got that experience in the military and stuff like that. He knows who to look for, and he knows what they're going to need, and he can set up tactics for them to actually train. So he's actually going to be their general, basically. So really cool stuff there. But anyways, going to call it there. Thank you guys so much for dropping by for the premiere. Hey, chat, hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Monday. As always, make sure that you hit that like button before you leave. If you're checking out the VOD later on, hope you enjoy the Mushoku Monday as well. You also hit that like button. But yes, as per usual, greatly appreciate you guys' kind words, all your support. It means so much to me. It's been a fantastic ride so far, and I cannot wait to see where we go from here. And then yes, as per usual, and always, I greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate everybody that supports channels monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. It's because of you guys that this keeps going. But yes, until the next Mushoku Monday, probably the last Mushoku Monday of 19, I'm assuming, because I think there's like 2 more chapters. I don't know. Y'all take care. But again, it's kind of cool, the idea that he wants to stay by her side. Even if they could assuage. Very well. Very. I like a Zanoba and like a Zanoba mixed with a Orsted. Very well.